KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty of the Faceless Men. Dagan, how are you today, my friend?
There we go.
Yeah. You just have to tell the man 3 cartoons that you need drawn.
That's right. And he shall get them done for me. Sir Dagan, the Garlic Knight.
The Garlic Knight, indeed. Micah calls us House Legume because we're always telling bean jokes.
Nice. Bean jokes.
Jokes, yeah. Like we just find beans really funny.
Beans are pretty humorous.
Micah's a weirdo, though. So.
I think beans are adorable, actually.
They are.
Right?
They are.
So cute.
And there are so many kinds of beans.
There are. Infinite
amounts of beans.
Give me the best bean. Give me number 1 top bean.
I mean, I'm going to say baked bean, but in terms of a natural bean, I don't know.
No,
green beans are pretty good. I mean, but God, baked beans. Hey, shout out to refried beans.
Oh,
shout out to refried beans.
Which is more of a paste, I'll argue, but that's fine. Whatever.
I was turned on to it when I lived in San Francisco. Really good stuff. Really good stuff. Love it. Absolutely. Looks like dog food / shit. But you know what? So does Mary Kitchen corned beef hash, and that shit is the jam. And we all know
a good comparison.
We all know
delicious, both not kind of unsightly, to be honest.
Actually, I'm loath to even tell this, but I bought a can of Mary Kitchen not too long ago. Every once in a while I get in the mood. I'm like, fuck it, I'm having corned beef hash. And I'll just make like a huge can of corned beef hash, just dump like 6 eggs in it and eat it. And I opened it, and it's kind of like, have you ever had Spam? You know, there's like a little bit of...
It's been a long time, but yes.
It's like a little bit of gelatin in Spam, like on the top. There was like a little bit of gelatin on top, and I'm like, I can't do it. And then I threw it out. And that was like an anomaly, you know, because it was probably sitting awkwardly or something in the can. So I was really turned off by it, and I was like kind of disappointed because I have those instances every so often with a food I really like where I'm like, fuck. You know, now I've ruined
that was
it.
enough to kind of ruin it for you, at least for a little while.
Maybe the Hot Pocket. I had a similar thing with a Hot Pocket in like 10th grade where it was moldy on the inside.
Oh, we had the same thing. You know,
and it was ruined for years. I mean, I couldn't eat a Hot Pocket.
That's atrocious that should happen. And that happened to Helene and I in college. Yeah. Same thing. Hot Pockets, like ham and cheese, maybe flavored Hot Pocket or something. It was, when you get a frozen food and there's mold inside of it.
Yeah, it's bad news.
Something's definitely not right.
Yeah, something's amiss.
Something's amiss.
At that point. Well, Dave, welcome all to you out there listening. Thank you so much for being here for KnockBack, our weekly retro and nostalgia podcast. We put it all up a week early and ad-free on Last Stand Media's Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We enjoy you over there. You enjoy us as well. So come on over, get your name in the credits, get early ad-free access, submit your questions, comments, and concerns, thoughts, and ideas to our show. If I'm slurring a little bit, I'm sorry. I am a little drunk. Because I went out to brunch with Mom, Dana, and Allie. They don't drink, but I sure do when we go out to brunch.
Mimosa? Bloody Mary?
No, old fashions.
Okay. All right.
Literally drinking like 3 old fashions at 1 p.m. But like we went to the Jefferson Hotel, which is like a beautiful place in Richmond a few weeks ago.
It's really nice there.
We went for tea, and that was really cool. A really cool experience. And what the girls and Mom are learning about me is that I like feminine things, which I think a lot of people know about me already because they're like, do you want to go and make candles? Are you sure you want to do that with it? I'm like, yes. Are you sure? And today we went and made like plant, like little succulents and all sorts of things, cacti in like planters, and we went and we made an appointment at this place and did that. And that was really cool.
Topiary? Is that topiary?
Terrarium.
Yeah, terrarium. There you go.
And so we did that beforehand, and that was fun. So it was like another one of these weird feminine kind of things we did. And I was like, yeah, I'm into it. And then we went and we go to a different place for brunch. But when we went to the Jefferson Hotel, it was awesome. It was like I wore a tie and like a shirt, whatever. And they were just drinking tea, and we had like all these little accoutrements. But then I just was pounding old fashions while they were drinking tea. And I just got hammered. And we had a fun time. But yeah, so anyway, I'm feeling the effects of that. Got home, came in hot. Micah unfortunately had a death in the family, so she is off up north beyond the wall,
out of state.
And she actually sent me a picture. She's in Buffalo right now. It's snowing up there. So right now here it's like 60. So I feel bad.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had to come home, came in hot, brought the dogs out. So we're recording a little late here on Sunday, but I'll do the best I can. That is why I was Maybe it's slurring a little bit with my
I like
S's.
it. You like Tyrion.
So, right, exactly. Well, he holds his liquor a lot better than me. I'm more like
good.
Cersei, let's say. But Dave, before we get into the topic at hand, which is Game of Thrones season 2, we already did season 1, of course. You can go listen to that. We're going to do season 3 and so on later. Before we get into season 2, want to stretch our legs a little bit. Is there anything you want to talk about before we begin?
I can't remember if it was yesterday or 2 days ago, but Helene's like, don't tell this story on the podcast. But it was one of those things that happened that I knew almost immediately I was going to talk about this on the podcast. This type of experience is made for talking about on the podcast or tweeting about. But it's usually more fun, commonly more fun to vocalize something, right? So this thing happened. And I want to get your take on this, okay?
Please.
And the audience's take on this. So this happened. Going on one of my leisurely daily walks, just a nice stroll around the kind of walking trails in the neighborhood. I shouldn't say leisurely. I go at a pretty brisk pace. I try to target like a 25 to 30 minute clip. So I have a proposed trajectory that I try to hit. I know if I hit that at a certain pace and I keep up that pace, I could get back in about 25 or 30 minutes. Maybe I do 2 of them a day if I'm lucky. So I'm. Do
you think there's someone filming? Do you think there's someone filming you, and then like underneath the screen it says like negative 0.5 seconds in red because you're behind the pace?
Now it's all I'm going to think about. Now that's going to be in the back of my mind. Like, am I performing up to snuff today? But, and this is the other. I'll save that story for another time. So I'm walking along the trail, and I kind of go on this specific course that brings me around the trail behind like the baseball field backstop. And then there's a little parking lot there because there's a playground, soccer fields, couple of baseball fields. So, and I know that field in particular is widely in use for a girls' softball league for a big part of the year. So there's a parking lot there, a nicely paved parking lot, whatever. There's very rarely any cars in this parking lot off season though. Once in a while, you'll see a contractor or a township worker truck parked there for lunch. It's just a scenic place to park and eat your lunch probably, right? The lake is right there. You can watch the geese, whatever. So, but again, very, very rarely do I see a car there in the wintertime, so early in the spring. So there's one car parked. It's around noonish. There's one car parked in the parking lot, and I see it's a silver SUV, and it's parked. It's backed in, so that obviously they could eat their breakfast or whatever, lunch, and look out at the lake. But I'm not looking who's in it. I happen to see there's a car there. I'm walking. I'm on my own. There's nobody around. So I get pretty close to the car, and right where the car is, I hang a Louis to go back down this one extension of path to get back near the lake, and then I go back into the neighborhood. But of course, it's quiet, nobody around. As I'm walking by the car, and the car, I should elaborate. The car is probably, I don't know, 30 feet from me. Okay, at my nearest point. I'm never going to get that. So I'm walking parallel to it, and I hear the car doors lock. And you got the power lock. Whoever was in the car. Now, again, I didn't look. Could have been a woman. Could have been a man. Could have been an older person and a younger person. I have no idea. Could have been several people. I have no idea. Hear the car doors lock. The power lock. Boom. It's a very distinctive sound. They all lock. It's pretty loud when there's no noises around, and it registers. It dawns on me what just happened.
Right.
And immediately offended.
Yeah, I understand. I've had that experience as well. It's a very interesting, similar experience. I've had that as well. I totally get it.
Because I'm wondering, right? Now this whole thing sort of unravels in my head now. This whole train of thought unravels. Like, what do I look like? Do I look like some vagabond? This is my neighborhood. Do you see what this neighborhood looks like? I'm getting offended. And the more I'm thinking about it, the more offended I'm getting, right?
Sure. So
now I'm thinking, but what's really funny, what the whole thing sort of brought up in my mind was this. Like you, and I'm sure everybody listening can relate, been in this situation before. I lived in LA. I spent a lot of time in New York, spent a lot of time downtown in Philly in the 90s. You go through these experiences where you're like, all right, I'm in the car, I'm sitting in the car, I'm idling, I'm waiting for someone. Maybe I'm a passenger in someone else's car, whatever. I have this experience, right? This cat looks a little shady. These cats seem a little off kilter. I'm going to lock the door. I could tell you with almost 100% confidence that I've never done it, though, because I will go to great lengths, ridiculous lengths, and probably put my safety on the line just not to offend somebody. I mean, there would have to be a madman pointing at me with a hockey mask and a chainsaw dripping with blood. And I might still not do it. I might still, maybe this cat's all right. You know what I mean?
Unless they were
Maybe
selling Pokemon cards, then you'd be all over.
And then I got to thinking, then the whole thing, this whole domino effect, that the whole walk is destroyed for me. I call Helene. I'm like, you never did, guess what just happened to me? I'm kind of like half outraged, half humored by it. But then I'm thinking, somebody's got to invent. Now, the advent of the power lock, which is a lock for you, those of you who don't drive, maybe you don't know. It's a lock that locks all 4 or 2 doors, whatever, at once. And there's a noise associated with that. It's not the old analog days where you push down the button. And this has existed on probably higher model cars since the mid 80s. This is not a new technology. Okay. What we have to do is come up with the non-offending power lock that is soundless. That does not make noise.
Well, we need it. There's got to be a little speaker. Remember like the old Cobra or like, well, that was a Viper. No, the Viper alarm systems in the 80s and 90s, and they would switch to you. They like when it locks, it's just like not because of you though. As you're walking by. It's just a coincidence.
Or if you're gonna be, I don't know, you're in some like pastoral neighborhood and did you really think you needed to lock the door for me? But here's the thing. If you're gonna be in that situation where you might have to do that, do it as soon as you park. Because now I'm offended. You ruined my whole walk, this person. Or people. I have no idea. Again, I don't know who it was. I want to see the car again because I want to see if it happens twice. Now, if I see the same exact car in the same exact spot, same exact day, who knows? This could be somebody who eats lunch here on the regular. I don't know. I just started these walks a month ago, right? I want to see if they know now that I'm not an offender of some kind. I'm not dangerous. And they got is one time enough to have confirmation of that? I don't know. I want to see if it happens again. I just want to see. I'm just thinking like and who knows? Maybe I do look shady.
No,
I don't know.
It's some people are scared of everything. Some people also like playing that game where they're like secretly in danger, and so maybe they were doing that as well. Like
sure,
they lock the door. Like when a computer is updating, I always try to pretend that. I'm like, come on.
Helene came up with
go.
No, that's definitely. I have that childlike thing too, where I told you guys on my walks, I come up with all kinds of shit in my head. Now I'm in Platoon. You know what I mean? It's like ridiculous. Now I'm in a Vietnam movie, and what would I do? Like, I can't even tell you the sort of like journeys, the fantastical, imaginative journeys that my mind goes
straight to Vietnam. You went. Good for you.
Pauline's like, maybe it was a hot chick, and she was unlocking the door.
Maybe.
I like this.
Could be.
Helene knows how to talk to me. She knows how to.
Yeah, she knows how to talk you down. Sure,
yeah, she definitely does.
It's funny, man, because I've told this story before because I was at E3, but years ago. But I remember walking down the street in like the middle of the night, probably like 3 or 4 in the morning, coming home from a bar or from a party or something like that. Last call in California is 2 o'clock, so it must have been from a party of some sort, someone's place, or whatever. Anyway, I was just walking down the street, and we used to stay by Staples Center, which is a horrible part of LA. It's by like Skid Row and stuff. So, I mean, who the fuck knows what's going on over there? But I remember just walking down the street, and there was just this cute blonde girl walking down the street towards me. I was just walking. Nothing was going to happen. And then she just walks into the street. It keeps walking towards me into the street in like an arc, like a semi arc, and then circle, and then back around, and like keeps going down the
wide
sidewalk.
berth.
And yeah, and I was like, I also was offended, but to me, I was like, I get it. I mean,
right.
This is like hell on earth in the United States anyway.
Yeah, right.
And like, who knows what's happened to you down here? But you almost want to be like, similar to what I was saying about the Viper alarms. Like, you want to be like, no, not me. No, don't worry about me.
I'm all right.
Yeah,
I would help you in said situation.
And you almost think about it in like a comedic way, like going back into that and saying, like, being like that, or if she would have found it funny, but she like starts walking. I'm not gonna. Don't worry about me.
That's a great thing.
And then just like keep walking, and maybe you like break the ice that way or something. Even who knows?
Sure, if you're single, you meet somebody, you might meet the
Skid
right
Row.
person that way.
Skid Row.
Skid Row.
I gotta tell you. What does he say in that song? I got something, man, you want to know. I'll tell you, Park Avenue leads to
back.
Skid Row. I didn't know what that meant when I was a kid at all. Well, that's an interesting story. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, it's okay. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, nothing interesting happening here. People wanted an end to the pool saga, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't
Give it
end
to
it
'em.
weeks ago when I was supposed to because it just seemed kind of insane to bring it up considering what was going on in the real world at that time. So I
I understand.
and still
that.
what's still
Sure.
going on in the real world. But yeah,
Right.
the answer is that it's basically done. We're just waiting for some creases to be fixed in the pool and like for it to be fully turned on, but everything's basically done. So hopefully we'll be able to be, well, it's too cold to swim in it still, but soon next month, next 2 months, it'll be warm enough down here in the south and we will begin using it in earnest. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, so nothing else to
Closure.
really report otherwise. We are here covering Game of Thrones again.
Yes.
It's kind of a bummer covering this because I want to watch it quicker than I'm able to watch it.
Dude, it's
And
so funny. I was thinking the
yeah.
same thing.
And I don't want to get too far ahead. Like I actually have not even begun season 3 with Micah yet because I'm like, I gotta just stop here. I gotta have patience.
Yeah,
have some patience.
Bit by bit, my friend. I know that's what I'm looking for. I was looking forward to recording with you today so I could restart season 3 because there's just so many happenings, so many characters. I don't want to cross that boundary, and I will. And I'll start mine. Everything will start blending, and then I'll
Exactly.
have to backpedal.
Exactly. And so I think we did a pretty good job of covering the first season, and people can go back and listen to that episode if they'd like. Let us know what you think. But I think with Game of Thrones, and we said this at the time, I think it's just one of those shows like The Sopranos, like Mad Men, and others where I think the only truly great way, like the truly perfect way to do a show like this is to do it episode by episode. And since we're not able to really do that, I think season by season is the next best way for us to do that. And so rather than being all encompassing in the couple of hours or few hours we record about Game of Thrones season 2, similar to the first episode, I kind of just want to touch on as much as we think is interesting or relevant, whether it's characters or events or plot points and arcs and all of these things. So that's kind of the nature of the game. Most people understood that with the first one, but as some people were like, I can't believe you didn't bring up this or this. I'm like, do you realize that this is a huge novel? I mean, even if I was actually hysterical because I was on Wikipedia earlier just looking at, and they have like the characters broken down by season, and it's literally a screen. I have massive like 25-inch or something monitors, and it's literally taking up my entire screen, and they're separated by like, here they are in the north and beyond the wall, and here they are in Essos, and here they are in all these different, I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'd have to almost be a fake historian and go into this and like tell the fake history. Now that would be cool as fuck.
That would be cool.
And there probably are YouTubers that have figured that out, but like you can be a fake, like be like, I am the historian of this fake world.
Yes.
And I tell a story. Oh, I love that. That's cool.
If they're good at it, I'm all in.
Yeah, that's good shit.
Oh, for sure.
That's good shit. So we'll do the best we can. And
Absolutely.
We obviously have guidance here from the audience. I got a lot of inquiries from you guys. I think I have 8 from the audience that I wanted to particularly go down because they discuss different characters and different plot points. But I wanted to ask you an overarching question at the beginning, Dig, which was, what did you think of this season? Because a lot of people think that Game of Thrones truly becomes great at this point. Now, I feel like Game of Thrones is great from the very beginning. Some people think the first season's a little weak. I don't, in rewatching it, I guess for the 3rd or 4th time, I don't see that with the first season, but there's no doubt that the second season cooks with gas. And I think that that's really interesting as it goes into the 3rd and the 4th season, and it really moves. And what I was kind of struck by having seen these already, like you, is, and like the people listening, I'm sure for the most part, is I didn't remember a lot of this stuff happening when it did. Like things were happening. I was like, that already happens?
Yes.
For instance, opening, I think it's the first episode, I think with Melisandre and all this. I'm like, that's already happening? And the gay king and all the other stuff. I was like, I don't remember any of this happening in the second season. I don't know exactly what I thought happened in the second season, but I didn't remember so much happening. So the mix gets pretty filthy at the beginning. Right at the start of the second season. I think it gets even more heinous as we know in the 3rd season. There's crazy shit that happens in the 3rd season.
Definitely.
Makes the second season look like child's play. But I'm curious at the top, what do you think of this season? How did you enjoy watching it, rewatching it? What is your takeaway?
So good. So good. The action in Westeros and Essos is heating up. I think the second season is, pound for pound, I think the second season is an improvement over the first season, but the first season has to do that duty of setting up the world. You know, it's tasked with setting up the world, introducing the characters. Now there's so many, especially with Ned and Robert's both death, right? Now the dominoes are falling and so many of the events are in place. That wheel is spinning and the action is just nonstop. You know, all those events, everything's taking place now with Robert dead, with Ned dead, that power vacuum in Westeros is created, and all these contenders vying for power, vying for the crown. And then everything happening with all the characters on 5 or 6 different scenarios that we're intercutting back and forth with. So good. Now, you would only know the second season, of course, is better than the first season in retrospect. And I do think that seasons 3 and 4 are where they really hit their stride and really get wonderful. And, we're also treated to the return of a lot of characters that we started to fall in love with or really become interested in season 1. And now we're meeting new characters that are just as amazing. So now we have an even bigger roster. It's almost unmanageable to even talk about. And it is kind of a big lament of doing a big show like this. I mean, we went through the same thing with Sopranos to a certain extent. Breaking Bad, we learned our lesson. We did them season by season. Any big show, it's like, as soon as you're done hitting that, as soon as you're done with the episode and you hit the stop button on the record, you're like, oh shit, I should have mentioned this. I should have mentioned that. So in that conversational sort of cadence, you're kind of hitting those highlights, but everybody's highlights are different. The show is that big, it's massive. So yeah, we got to try to do it justice the best we can. And I enjoyed the hell out of season 2. And like you said, Kyle, that my biggest lament is like having to hit the brakes for a second and not go into season 3, because that momentum is so key. It's so wonderful. And like you too, you spoke to this already too, which really hits home. It gets though, in watching it and rewatching it now for me the third time over, yeah, you lose track of when things happen, when characters are introduced, certain events that transpire you think came later. And it just reminds you, I wrote down a list of 7 or 8 characters that are key, that are wonderful, that we haven't even met yet through season 2. So this could move at it. This could be a breathless type of conversation. We have 6 more episodes after this one.
Yeah. And I think I told you I started reading the books again. I don't know if I said that on the last episode.
You did. Yeah.
And so I'm still in the first book, like very early. It's very slow. I actually reread some of the chapters because I was like, I don't even know what I just read, but it's so interesting with the hindsight of the TV show. It really is assistive in understanding the books better. And that's kind of where I've been finding my respite, because even now with Micah gone for a few more days, I can't watch it without her. But what's exciting is that she gets back Wednesday, and then we are going to record, I think, again on like a few days later with season 3. Right. And what I'm excited about is like we don't have to hold back at all, because what we were doing really at night was just like, all right, let's watch an episode, and then I'm like, all right, we have to stop now. And we would put on Trailer Park Boys or something instead. Now we can, which is great, but different.
That's a contrast.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a nice contrast.
But all right, Dig, I want to begin, I guess, at the very top, because we see in the beginning of the season, we see Joffrey's name day. Now, Joffrey is in power now and is trying to figure out everyone's loyalties, and we see more of Sansa. And what is interesting here is Tyrion comes in and is, unbeknownst to all of them, made Hand of the King by his father, their father. And it's a fascinating kind of turn of events that cuts them off at the legs for now. I mean, they kind of undo it later. But it's interesting because we have an inquiry here from Drew Elder, who wrote into us on Patreon and says, hello, gents. First time, long time. When I first saw Dagan tweet about watching Thrones, I knew he would love Tyrion. In my opinion, season 2 is Tyrion at his best. What was your favorite scene or line of dialogue from him this season? I got to say, from the very start, when you see him waltz in, he's got an amazing run here. He's a really wonderful character. And I actually looked this up. My favorite quote is when he's getting ready. First of all, Tyrion's badass and bold. I love that. He's brave. He's not scared of anything. It's awesome. And when he gets all armored up and he's talking to the guys and he's like, those are brave men knocking at our door.
Love it.
Let's go kill them.
I love it.
It's so great. It's such a great line. I love, he seems to be the main character this season. If Lord Stark was the main character of the first season, which I think he was, then I think Tyrion is the main character of the second one. So to the point made here by our listener, Drew, you have taken a Tyrion as he predicted, and as I predicted as well. I think that was obvious. I think he speaks most of the kinds of characters you like. He's quick and witty. He's brave and kind. He's all those kinds of things that are attractive. So I'm wondering how you feel about his turn in this season as he becomes someone with real power and prestige, and how he uses that power. And, you know, not to get too far ahead, I guess, but it's all over the place. So he saves them and gets no credit for it at all. And so I think he's just a wonderful character, especially in this season. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about Tyrion Lannister.
He's so wonderful. I mean, to have all these, it's almost like it gets so good with Tyrion that you're almost like all the rest of these wonderful characters and these wonderful events and places in the show that transpire are almost like a bonus, because Tyrion is just at the center of it for me. He's wonderful. Such a wonderful, like, delicious character. I love when he's come. Tywin, I don't know, maybe a mistake on Tywin's part to give Tyrion so much power. When he comes back, Joffrey's on the throne now, and we know Joffrey is a reprehensible human being or monster, or whatever you want to call him. And Tyrion comes, swaggering in, and his whole thing in this season is to check his vile family and their entire host of characters that are working for the family. And we see that he is really so different than Cersei, than Tywin, from all the other people that are sort of that operate underneath them, Cersei's lieutenants and everything like that. And how at the center of it, a lot of it is that his beloved brother is in captivity from the Starks. And Jaime is really, we learned, probably the only Lannister that Tyrion really loves. And a little later on, we learn the backstory and the origins to that. But he comes through, his whole thing is to, basically run up against and butt his family and just try to check them. And it's a power check, really. And he's that whole thing where he's clever enough to do that. He's very intelligent. And you're right, he is very courageous. And the thing is, too, he enjoys it. We learn that later in the season. He's like, when Shay's like, let's get out of here. They tried to kill you. Like, he's really single-handedly almost saving King's Landing. And they still try to murder him. The Lannisters still try to murder him in the battle. That's how he's betrayed. And Shay's like, let's get out of here. And he's like, I can't. This is what he knows. This is his place. He knows he's good at it. And he knows he's probably starting to realize he's the only thing coming between the Lannisters basically overruling this entire place, this entire kingdom, this entire land with their evil. Basically, he's really between the Lannisters' evil and everything. And it's interesting that this little dwarf character, this seemingly insignificant dwarf character, is the one that's really protecting everybody, which is so funny because he, when we meet him, he loves his whores, he loves his drinking, he's rich, he's sort of this like little playboy type, but he's really not. There's so much more substance to him. And I love that scene where, it's early in the season, maybe episode 2 or 3, where he's kind of vetting everybody. He's Grandmeister Pycelle, Littlefinger, Varys. He's telling them different things and telling them not to tell the queen to see who's on his side. He's vetting their loyalty. Amazing. That's Tyrion at his best, and it works. The thing he does with Lancel, which is, their cousin, but Cersei's new lover also. So who could he trust? He's kind of surrounding himself with people. He's trying to surround himself with allies and making sure that the fringe is cast to the side. The people that he can't trust are cast to the side. And he comes in, he comes back to King's Landing swinging. And it's really fun to watch. And of course, you really also feel bad for him because they really despise him. They straight up want to get rid of him. They want him dead.
Yeah, it's interesting that Tywin makes that decision and puts him in that position of power. And I love that scene when he slaps the king in the face twice, which is
so good.
When they're in the throne room and they're redoing the throne room and he's kind of destroying the beautiful art that they had there. And it's going to be something much more dramatic and violent when it's done. And he does that in front of everyone. And not even Joffrey, who's a psychopath, and you obviously see that throughout the season, he will have anything done about it, which is
so good,
which is really cool and really interesting. And I like that a lot. There's a bravery there. I think more than ever in watching this again, just realized how brave that character is. He is, like you said, unimposing. It's almost a joke. Anyone would be able to take him in a fight theoretically, but he armors up. I love his squire Pod.
Oh,
and I love that he's like, fuck it. There's actually a great scene, not even with him suiting up before that, when they're kind of, some people are busting in. I think it's Cersei and maybe Pycelle, and he's like poring over these documents and maps, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, what do you think I'm doing? Stannis is coming here with his pirate fleet, and we have to fight them back. Don't you? It's actually interesting because he's like, don't you understand what is happening? And to both Joffrey and to Cersei and others, like, don't you understand the gravity of the situation right now? And so I loved that scene too, where he's like, what do you think I'm doing? He's going through all these books and he's trying to figure out, very similar to the detective work, as we said, that was done by Stark in the first season. There's almost a tactical edge now, a military edge that you see out of multiple Lannisters, actually, with Tywin as well, during season 2. And I really like that scene. And then, of course, later on, I love him suiting up and getting back into the fight. And similar to how he was knocked out with the hammer accidentally, he gets sliced in the face. Actually, a really brutal and violent scene. Very great acting, watching his face, kind of the horror, the life leaving him, is aghast. And watching that scene of him getting sliced up, I was like, I wonder if he thinks he's dying, or I wonder if he understands that he'll never be the same as he's fainting and going into whatever, mental abyss that he's in, and maybe he'll wake up or maybe he won't. It's really fascinating kind of arc he takes. He has power for a little while. He knows he's in danger. He knows he can escape, like you said, and he throws it all on the line. And you would think he would be the toast of the town, especially with what he did with the Alchemist Guild and all the rest. But instead, he is kind of shrugged off and, like you said, cast aside.
Yeah, he's put in a storage closet to recover.
Right, exactly.
He's so despised. And he's so great, too. You realize in this season that he's so good at surrounding himself with people that will help him and keep him alive. You have Bronn, who's a sellsword, who Tyrion pays a lot of money to protect him. But there's something to Bronn that... Yeah,
Bronn likes him.
They like each other.
Right.
There's a friendship blossoming there. And then with his new squire, with Podrick, he's just... there's so much more to Tyrion than you're led to believe he's capable of in season 1. There's that bravery and that courage, and there's that dignity, that righteousness, almost a fairness, a chivalry that the rest of his family doesn't seem to possess. Something where there's something that it's not just about preserving that family. He's better than that. He's much bigger than they are. And, he's also got that knack and that cleverness of surrounding himself with people that will help him, that will help his purpose, and will help him succeed in his ends, and will keep him alive. And we're starting to see that he's going to be pretty hard to kill for a little man.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it, because I love how I just love how he's out there. Like, again, going back to the first episode or the first season where he's on the vanguard of the fight, and they're like, are you kidding? Like, they're trying to get him killed, but he does it anyway. I just think it's very interesting. Yeah, he is all about the loyalty. And in the first season 2, when he's leaving the Vale and he throws the the bag of gold coins at the jailer, saying like, and you've kind of had already forgotten that.
Yes,
it didn't even happen. And the jailer was an idiot. He probably would have totally forgotten that ever happened.
Right.
But there's like something about that principle, the way he carries himself. But
principle's perfectly put. Yeah.
Let's stay with the Lannisters for now. I like this question from Eric Wilson. He says, "What's up, Super Moriarty Bros?
Yo,
one of my favorite moments this season were the scenes between Arya and Tywin. Maisie Williams and Charles Dance play beautifully off each other. It's such a great revision to Arya's storyline. Very different to how it was in the book. She encounters someone else at that point in the story. I prefer the show's version. Wish you guys well. Thanks." I don't know anything about that. Not there yet. Can't speak to it. So we'll stick with the TV version. But yeah, these two, I don't know if it must have been written like this, but you almost wonder, like, did they put them together and realize, oh, you guys are actually kind of good together. Like, you guys are actually very compelling.
Yeah.
As a pair. Should we play that up? But there's something just very compelling about Tywin anyway. And like I told you, Micah says that it just reminds her of our dad.
Definitely true. That rings true.
And yeah, I can see that. And obviously Arya is hiding her. So the whole thing about Arya hiding her gender so that she doesn't get raped and attacked on the road to Winterfell. The only couple people that know, like Gendry, don't even know who she is. Although she comes out to Gendry during the voyage, she doesn't. And then she pays Gendry back by identifying the dead person, I think. And when the Lannisters send their troops out to try to find him. But Nonetheless, I feel like there's something annoying about characters that are supposed to be like the badass anti-hero, kind of like, I do it my way and I'm not going to listen to anyone. My dad's dead and I'm going to, but Arya doesn't come off like that. She comes off like very mature, wise, like many characters, or I'm sorry, unlike many characters in shows, she does the things you kind of want her to do. It's never like, oh, why? It's like watching the horror movie where it's like, why are you going back in the house? Like, why are you doing this? Leave, go up. She never seems to make the wrong decision. She seems to actually do the right thing. She's righteous, but I like that about her. And so when she finds herself, you can imagine a person like her finding themselves in this position and immediately giving themselves up, being like, well, at least I have Tywin's attention now. I can tell her that they have me, and that's like a piece of value. But she actually hides it and tries to get word out to Robb, and even talks Robb up, which I love that scene when she's like, I heard, are you going to fight at the front of the line? Like oh no, that was Sansa when she's like, you're going to fight at the front of the line like my brother Robb.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that. I hear he rides in the battle on the back of a wolf or something like that. It's good shit. Great. Arya always has that spirit and that energy about her. And I dig that because she gets herself so in so deep that you can imagine the only way she wouldn't be in peril with Tywin was to have told him right away, because now she's privy to like all of their secrets and she's there, a party to all of the drama and all the obviously the secret attack and all that back to get back to the capital. She was privy to that and all of that as well. So I'm just curious what you thought about Arya and Tywin and their relationship, to Eric Wilson's question. How do you like those scenes and their storyline with each other? I don't know what happens in the book, so I can't speak to it.
That gives me even more reason to read the books. Yeah, Tywin and Arya in season 2 is, I find, one of the most compelling aspects of this entire 10 episode run. It's this rapport that this kingly, majestic, pretty much the head of, let's just call him what he is. He's the head of the Lannisters. It's not Joffrey, it's Tywin.
Right. He's like the regent, basically.
Yeah. He's the king regent, and he's, and he, all his stuff, his cleverness, his intelligence, his military might, his history in battle, the way he's celebrated and feared, he backs it up. He's made of this, he's the real thing. Tywin is the real thing. And this rapport that he forms with this little girl is so striking because he's a scary dude, but he's kind to Arya. And I do remember watching this the first time and thinking, oh shit, Arya is in trouble. He knows who she is. And is he stringing her along in some way towards some evil end? Is he toying with her? And I kind of forgot, to be honest with you, how it transpired beyond season 2. And even in watching again, I was worried for Arya. You do think over a certain amount of episodes, I would say, like, oh crap, he knows, or he strongly suspects who she is, but it actually turns out kind of differently. He just sees something in her. He sees her nobility. He sees her courage. And Arya is a really interesting character because you have to remember, she's the youngest Stark that sort of endured this tragedy that started with the beheading of her dad unjustly. And then everything else that sort of, all the other things that fell in place as a result of that. She's a little girl, dude. And now she's being, ushered up to the wall to protect her by this guy who kind of promised her dad, the Urine character, who promised her dad that he would get her to safety. And this was kind of seen as the only way. And you know what? Another thing I forgot about Arya this season that was so striking and so emotional for me. There's a scene later in the season where she's sitting with Urine, right before Urine's killed, actually. There's a couple of Lannister scouts that suspect there's a couple of bastards in that posse heading up to the wall. And Urine and company takes care of them, but they know more Lannisters are on the way, that they're going to pursue them with a bigger group. And they come. But just before that, Arya can't sleep, and Urine tells her this story and basically tells her a story about how revenge is kind of what fueled him. And that's the thing that kind of kept him alive. So she's kind of got it from two fronts. She's got it from Urine, who's kind of a short-lived mentor, and the Jaqen character, which is the same thing, which basically this whole purpose of that you could actually get revenge. There's vengeance to be had. And there's a righteousness in that. So so emotional. But what I didn't realize, of course, Arya is suffering for her family. She misses her family, the ones that are alive. She wants to be back with them. She's grieving for her dad. But what I did forget was that she still thinks Sansa's a traitor, and it's weighing heavy on her. She's saying, I can't escape the vision of seeing my dad up there with Cersei and Joffrey and Sansa. And then you realize, oh shit, she doesn't know what we know. She thinks her sister betrayed the family. This is her sister. And of course, they had that sibling rivalry. They were kind of butting heads. But I was like, wow, I totally forgot about that. So it just really makes you pine for Arya and her pain and what she's going through, and that courage that she has to just stay alive in that world. And you almost think Tywin's taking her under his wing somehow, but he has some kind of it gives the character of Tywin some humanity, because he's pretty much the top monster in this group of monsters, right? So it really gives him a very interesting humanity, at least so far, up to the end of season 2. And I always wanted to cut back to that and see how that relationship was going to develop. He always called her out, but she was always honest with him. She claims to be someone else. She doesn't know the sigil. He's kind of testing her. He's like, you're from the north. And she's like, yeah, I'm from the north. Then she kind of lies again, and then he doesn't call her on it, and she's trying to hide her face from Littlefinger and all. You're like really kind of on the edge of your seat watching what Arya has to endure over the course of the season.
I love when she gets the book off seat.
And she can read, because some of his lieutenants can't even read.
He starts to tell her like what book it is, and then she just grabs the right book.
He sees something in her.
Right. Yeah. So
and it's kind of like the Fox and the Hound. They're born enemies. One's a Stark and one's a Lannister. But there's this common ground. And you wonder, in another situation, in another life, could these two have been friends? Could she have been a squire in the future? Who knows? So it's a very interesting relationship. I love how it plays out. You're almost sorry to see her leave Harrenhal, because you kind of want a little more of it.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I wonder, with it being different, I wonder what the inspiration by that being different from whatever happens in the book to the show. Again, not knowing, I really do wonder if they realized that they had some sort of chemistry between these very interesting disparate characters, or if, obviously the story kind of demands a little bit of unknowing FaceTime, let's say, between the Lannisters and the Starks. So that's cool too.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about that happens early in the season, and I feel like it kind of comes and goes, but I really love it. I think it starts in the second episode, if I'm not mistaken, is the comet.
Oh, yeah.
There's really cool visuals in this show, as we all know, from the sigils, like we were saying, and beautiful castles and cities, and just absolute amazing everything in this show. It's a feast for the eyes. But I really love the comet, and it's funny because last night I was in bed watching things that I can only get away with when Mike is not here watching. So I was watching like medieval history documentaries or something. And I watched an entire hour-long documentary about this, the year 535 and into 536 AD, and how they did all this dendrochronology and all this amazing stuff to figure out that Krakatoa erupted in 535, and there were 2 years that were diminished by sun, and there was these poets and artists and historians and the church and everyone kind of writing about the sun dimming and the omen and all this kind of stuff, and people dying, and there's famine and all this. And they just didn't realize that, not that it was not a big deal to them, but they didn't realize that it was just like, oh, there's just a bunch of dirt getting kicked into the atmosphere, and that's why the sun is dim, and that's why things are different, right? And it caused catastrophe to them, but they didn't understand why. They looked at it as an omen, and it was a bad time for them. And I thought about that with the comet in season 2, and I love the imagery of comets in history, in ancient history, and I'm sure you and your audience have seen it in the past. Like, these things would appear, no one had any idea what the fuck they were, and they would appear in the sky moving slowly and maybe there for weeks and maybe even a couple of months, and they'd be like, what the hell is that? And imagine if you don't know anything. You're like, what the fuck is that? What is that?
How frightening that must have been.
And it's interesting, over time they start putting it together. Like the Chinese, I think, did it first, and the Persians, where it's like, oh, Halley's Comet is this thing that comes back every 76 years. We can actually start to predict where it was going to come back and all. So it's interesting that they were able to do that. But for all of those things that very smart people in certain corners of the world were able to glean, even going into the 20th century, depending on where you were, there were people that would see something like that and be like, oh my God, our crops are going to fail, or oh my God, someone's dead. And I love that in this world, they look at it and they describe it as the color of blood. Lannister red, someone says the comet is. And what I love about that comet and that scene, and I'd love to see how it reads in the book when I finally get there, is I love that it connects everyone, similar to the moon and the sun and all of these things that we see in the sky. We see the same sun, we see the same moon and all of that. Everyone's looking at the same comet, and they're seeing it from this angle, and then on Essos, and then over Westeros, they're looking at it, and they're looking at it from a different angle, and they're gleaning something different from it, and maybe it's a defensive omen and something that's not inspirational. And then for these other people, it's like, oh, it's a sign to go, it's a sign of blood. Let's go. Let's get this done. I love that. I love that imagery, and I love how it ties, intentionally or unintentionally, although I think it's probably intentionally, to real historicity of these things happening and people not knowing anything about it. And I wonder if you were taken by the comet too. I wish that there was more to that. Like, I don't know if there is in the book, but I wish there was more to the comet than just this one episode of tying it together visually. But anyway, did you take to it as well?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, understated image to have in the show. I love the way they do it. I love the way they pull it off. And it is really cool. It's cool to see it from those different vantage points of the world. You know, they're looking at it over the woods of Winterfell and Osha. The wildling is sort of saying it's some sort of omen or a sign that portends one thing, portends it's the sort of a sign of dragons. And then, Daenerys and her host are looking at it above the red wastes in the desert. And of course, Jorah, and they're kind of figure it out. And Bran is trying to figure out how it ties in with his dreams and his visions and stuff like that. It's a great physical foreshadowing of something. And I love the way they say, some of them at least say that, this is a sign of dragons returning to the world. It's so cool to tie that in, these legends or these myths, to tie it in with something astrological. It's so thoughtful. It's stuff that I really haven't seen again in the main sort of high fantasy world, the stuff that we know, such as Lord of the Rings. I've never really seen. It's another dimension that we'll talk about other things that this season does too, that I'm like, oh shit, that's a great way to tie in, for instance, pirates. Right. It's like I love the way Game of Thrones sort of takes all these really inventive things and puts it into the stew. It's so cool. Who would have thought?
I agree.
And it's understated. They don't really dwell on it. It's just another aspect that's just a thoughtful part of making that of the world building that we talked about in season 1.
Let's talk. We have to about an important couple of characters that are introduced in a major way in the second season. Stannis and Melisandre. Mike W. wrote in and said, hey, C&D, what did you guys think of Stannis? While everyone in the show seemed to hate him, I found it hard to argue with the idea that he is the next in line to inherit the throne, at least with what we know at this point. I also want to give a shout out to the actor who played him, Stephen Delane, who gives an outstanding performance while not knowing what the hell is going on in the show, to the point of having to ask his co-stars to explain the story to him. Thanks for all that you do. I kind of get that vibe from him, which is what's so funny, but I think it actually adds to like his regalness. Like, he just doesn't care about anything but his single-minded quest to take the throne. Stannis is an interesting cat, and we were talking about the different components that Game of Thrones adds that would be a little bit supernatural, a little bit unbelievable, and it makes it work. And you were talking about pirates. We'll get to that. The other thing, or another thing that I think is introduced here in a major way, is religion. We finally get a real look at religion, apart from some of the visuals we get from I guess they would be the new gods, as you would describe them. We obviously see in the north, the old gods with those trees and all the things that they do. This is a whole different religion, and the fire god, and the night is dark and full of terrors, as she says over and over again, this fire cult. And it's pretty wild. You see them for the first time on the beach burning the idols of what they would look at, I think, as the old gods. And it's pretty crazy. It's an interesting use of religion, and I think actually ups the ante for the first time. Like well, maybe not the first time. The dragons kind of up the unbelievability a little bit.
Sure.
Not in a bad way. And I think this kind of brings it to the next level, although a lot of the stuff I love the most comes through the fire god, in quotes, and all the magic that they cast. But I love this because this is when they start bringing in real magic, and not only the blood magic and the weird kind of regenerative shit that they did to Drago, but what do you think about the introduction of Stannis and his priestess Melisandre, and his kind of single-minded quest for this mysterious notion that he does have a claim to the throne. Although, as was suggested by Mike, and I agree in his letter, maybe Stannis does have some sort of claim that supersedes others. So what do you make of this?
I really enjoyed Stannis this season, and it wasn't a favorite character my first time around, and I had kind of spoiled it for myself a little bit, not in seeing something too early, but I had read early on that Stephen Delane didn't like doing the role. And this was very early on. Maybe I even read that in the first or very early in the second season. And I always had a little bit of a bias against the guy after that, realizing like, oh my God, A, because he's so good. And B, just because how can you not enjoy being a part of this thing? I love hearing the tale of having to ask his co-stars about lines or just not getting it, because he really is great.
Yeah,
but I always had that sort of hedge against him because I knew he didn't like doing it. And it's a shame because he is so good. I mean, I think, honestly, one of the best 5 minutes of this entire season is Stannis's Storm's End, his tale, his monologue to Davos about the Storm's End siege. And it's kind of exposition on how Davos came to be at Stannis's right hand and what he did to smuggle food through the supply lines and stuff. Or through a blockade, through a trade blockade, actually. And it's so interesting. And he was so good telling that tale of that we had to eat the rats, we had to eat the cats, we had to eat the dogs and the horses because we had no food. We were starving. It was a siege. And how Davos came to smuggle all this food to the men and everything like that. So it's an awesome monologue. It's so good. It's Shakespearean, actually. It's wonderful. And I just really enjoyed the character, and just having that sort of like, it was making me laugh because Stannis of the Baratheon brothers, he's kind of got that Jan Brady syndrome. He's the middle kid. He was sort of robbed, apparently, of his position. He's definitely seen as the least charismatic of the three brothers. And apparently, after, he held Storm's End during this battle, he was a boy, and he basically held that while Robert was away, he had to hold down their home. And when Robert came back, apparently he awarded Storm's End to Renly and not Stannis. And Stannis kind of just took it on the chin. So from that moment on, Stannis really was sort of robbed of his position or his birthright in a way, especially after his big brother is murdered. So you are kind of sympathetic to him, even though he's kind of largely an unlikable. He's very solemn. He's dour. He's not very fun. And I love the introduction, or just saying basically this world as it exists, or at least Westeros, which is considered, I guess, the West, that there's two different religions at play here. There's the old religion and what's seen as the new religion with the fire god. And this is kind of this fire god thing, this Melisandre character being a proponent of that is a relatively new and almost shocking thing that's sort of disturbing the foundations of Westeros a little bit, especially the people that are members of practicing the original or the older religion of the seven gods, and how this new thing is coming and people don't trust it, and people think it's almost akin to like a blood magic type of thing that we saw in the first season. Very interesting things that you're tying in here. And I love the contrast between the brothers. Here's one thing I realized during watching the season again. This show, more than any other, is for me a show of what ifs. And I think a big part of that is characters dying too early. We lose Robert. We lose Ned. Eventually, we're going to lose very other important characters. And you're left wondering, how would it have played out if this character could just stay alive a little longer? How would it have played out if Ned and Robert could kind of rule hand in hand? How would that have affected the events going forward if at least one of them lived? And not only that, but seeing characters together. That scene where Stannis and Renly meet to kind of treat before this seemingly inevitable battle takes place is so great, because you're getting to see these two brothers together. How cool would it have been to see Robert and Stannis interact? How cool would it have been to have Tywin and Robert interact? So I'm left with that a lot in the show, where you kind of feel the loss of that character. So it's nice to get, a character like Stannis at least interacting with the ones that, to see what, how can a character like this, who seemingly has no luck, how is this going to play out for him now that there is this power vacuum and a chance for him to claim the throne? You're almost rooting for him a little bit.
Yeah, he's interesting too. I'm glad you brought up that scene that with him and Renly. I love when Renly's like, "Why is your stag on fire or something like that. He has like no respect for him at all. It's
None.
it's like
And
really
he's the little
interesting.
brother,
Right, exactly.
not battle
And-
tested at all.
Right. Now he's got that hot wife, even though he's gay. And she's a hot little
He prefers her brother.
Right, exactly. I love that she admits that too. She's like, should I get my brother?
She knows.
But I wanted to get a little further into the Melisandre character as well. Anthony Corrado wrote in and said, hello, House Moriarty. Hope all is well. I can remember vividly watching as Melisandre birthed the shadow Stannis and thinking, did we just jump the shark? In a story that involved zombies, giants, and dragons, I was surprised to see something like this put out into the ether. Until this point, I felt the story didn't stray too far into the fantasy realm, but I certainly was taken aback by this. Out of all the crazy stuff that happened this far into the series, I felt like this was a pivot point into something more than a medieval story. How did you gentlemen feel about this? Hope all is well from Northeastern PA. Thank you, Anthony Corrado.
Hey, Northeastern PA.
Right in your neck of the woods.
Not too far.
So I feel like I didn't mind this. I think it just kind of happens a little weird and kind of happens too quickly. I don't think it's even obvious what is happening, where it's birthing like a form of Stannis to assassinate him himself. And it's just like this kind of weird magic. And it's like a degenerative magic, I think. And there's all this weird stuff. I don't think they really get into it deeply enough to make it pop as much as it probably could have. But I think it is designed in my mind to also play up the inherent sexuality of the Melisandre character, who obviously is just, that's part of who she is. And part of, I think, her draw to these various men that she enchants, including Stannis above all else. What did you make of that particular death for Renly? I think if anything, it's not that it happened. It's maybe just unfortunate that we didn't get more before that happened. It was very dishonorable, but Stannis is kind of down to do anything, I guess. So how do you feel about Melisandre, and how did you feel about that kind of birthing of that spirit, that assassin spirit?
It's well said. I think that could be seen as an early jumping the shark moment. That we definitely walking that razor's edge. It's a little weird how it's presented, but I do understand why they did it. Maybe they did it a little too early. So you have this fire magic. You have this whole one god thing. You have this fire priestess. And it's all talk. And she's selling it to Stannis, who's a heavy contender for the throne, for the Iron Throne. And it's this whole thing where you see people, they don't trust it. Sir Davos, seemingly a pretty noble guy. He's definitely a cynic. So you had to do something. The writers probably felt they had to do something to make this religion seem more tangible and real and effective. So this fire priestess breeds this shadow demon thing that goes and kills Renly. And so now it becomes real. Now this becomes a real thing, whether it's some sort of evil magic or whether it's on the up and up as a wholesome religion. We don't know. It doesn't seem that way. It seems like evil so far. Maybe it's a misdirect. Maybe it really is evil, but you had to kind of put something, you had to kind of walk the walk and not just talk the talk at this point. And also you have a great character in Sir Davos, who's this smuggler turned sort of Stannis's chief lieutenant turned future hand of the king. You know, he's promised a higher role. And you see this character who seems inherently good. He doesn't seem to have too many character flaws. He seems like a good guy. And he seems to have Stannis's best interest at heart. But he's definitely distrustful of this fire priestess, who Stannis sort of betrays his wife over and all these other things. It kind of leads you to believe that this fire magic is not to be trusted. This whole religion is not to be trusted. So to actually do something, I think, and make it real, you know, that was the whole point of the scene. Also very interesting that Melisandre, even though Davos seems like a pretty squeaky clean character, he seems like he seems like a pretty chivalrous dude. But it seems like Melisandre is starting to tempt him in those caves. And before that happens, and then he's kind of snapped awake again by it.
Yeah, she says something like, do you want to see this naked body or something?
And she says, you will. Yeah. So, and she's kind of, not only does she seem like she's a practicer, a powerful practicer of this religion, but she's a little bit of a seductress as well. So it's like, you know, it's interesting the way it played out. But again, I think they do ground it. Thank God, even, you know, you have this kind of weird jumping the shark moment where nothing like that is kind of in nothing like that. Now, Dany's dragons are born. We know what kind of world we're getting into. We see a little bit of that blood magic with Khal Drogo in the first season, but we don't really get into like shadow warriors and this real other kind of evil D&D stuff until this happens. So it's kind of jarring. But I think the acting and the performances, especially by Stannis, by Sir Davos, by Melisandre, by these character actors, they're the ones that really ground it. And I think the acting is so good in this show that it would be really hard to jump the shark. I think that kind of really keeps it grounded.
I also would say that, and per a point we brought up earlier, it's just that the introduction in a more imminent way of religion is cool. Like that, it doesn't seem like God plays a relevant role in the other houses that we've met, or with the other houses that we met, apart from their tradition. For instance, we pray to the old gods or the new. We do this or that. We have this right or this right. But it didn't seem like really relevant. It's interesting to see a true holy warrior, and we really see that played up more later with the power of fire and all that, which is neat. But with that in mind, it doesn't seem that ridiculous to say, like, okay, since we're introducing this religiosity to the show in a more ready way, then there's going to be a more spiritual aspect to it, and that comes with a certain number of, in the fantasy world, that comes with a certain tolerance for the supernatural, which I think is fun. And we already kind of had that cherry popped, not to be gross, but with the with the blood magic. I mean, and the dragons. I mean, this doesn't really seem that crazy when you compare it to that, especially again, with it being so interesting that people are probably on that beach, for instance, watching the idols burn and being like, holy shit, this is insane. I'm actually seeing this happen. And I believe, because I'm seeing it. While if you went 1,000 miles away from that place, they probably wouldn't even believe that ever happened, or that a person like this exists, or that there is a supernaturalism at all. And that's what's so fun about this. Like we've said before with the wall, people don't even believe there is anything out there at all.
Yeah.
Because it's been so long since anything has happened. So I love that. I think that it's a little, it's not that it happened that bothers me. It's more that it's just like, that's how Renly goes out. And unfortunately that brings Brienne in, and kind of her getting framed for it and all of that, which kind of sucks too. We'll talk about her in a moment, in a little while.
No, you're right, dude. And you know what, just real quick.
Yeah,
also, by the way, we'll see much more of this at the end of season 2, but we've already seen Walking Dead. So maybe the Shadow Warrior isn't a bridge too far. We've seen some pretty, we've seen all the ghostly supernatural things that could happen in this world already. So just another one, I guess.
Indeed. Let's talk a little bit about Theon Greyjoy and the Iron Islands. So Theon is dispatched to the Iron Islands to reunite with his family after about a decade, of course. During a previous war, he is taken as ward of the Starks and basically grows up as a Stark son in all but name. So he's dispatched with Robb Stark's trust, to go back and treat with his father and figure out if they kind of want to join forces against the Lannisters. And I think in return for kind of like the Iron Islands sovereignty again, which the Iron Islands are not sovereign under the Baratheon rule post-war, as far as I understand it. And so basically what Robb is saying is like, we want to be kind of an independent kingdom. You can also be an independent kingdom. Let's team up and fight together.
Sure.
And that's kind of the plan.
Right.
So Theon is sent to figure that out. He's sent to Pike, which is the capital. And first of all, I love that castle out in the crags. It is so dope.
How cool is that?
Like the different like they built the towers and they're all attached.
It looks so tenuous.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's amazing. It's just,
I love it.
It's just, it's just incredible. And hey, we were talking about visuals with the comet. Shout out to the sigil of the Greyjoys, that octopus, that fireplace with the octopus fireplace is probably one of the coolest, if not the coolest thing,
dude,
that you've seen in the show so far. I'm like, that's just incredible. And the drowned god and we do not sow and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, did you pay the iron price? I actually am asking Mike that constantly. I'm like, did you pay?
So good, dude.
She came back from Publix the other day. I was like, did you pay the iron price? It's like, Jesus, I hope not.
I hope
just a little bit of chicken and some breadcrumbs.
I hope she paid the gold price.
But this is a whole interesting. First of all, Theon's annoying, but it introduces, first of all, and he's dumb. By the way, he's just stupid.
Yes.
And I think that that's the intention. He stabs the Starks in the back ultimately, but before that happens, we kind of are introduced to both his dad and his sister. And what I like about this is kind of it depends on where you are, it seems like, in this world, but this seems like a much more genderless society, the Iron Islands. How his daughter's not only risen up to take his place by her father's side, but that she's kind of like the captain of their fleet is pretty awesome. And I love how she like goes to meet him at the ship, and he's like feeling her up and being like just a complete asshole, and she's just letting it happen. It's just really good shit. It is weird, but it's good stuff because she's setting him up and she knows it, so she's just patient. What do you make of seeing the Iron Islands and the Greyjoys in the flesh and all of their cold and watery traditions? I love him getting kind of like baptized, it looked like, and with the drowned god and all of that, and just their whole way of doing things. And how I love the saying, "We do not sow." Like they literally have this society that's built on stealing and robbing. That's it,
so
like just
good.
pillaging, very Viking. It's so interesting to me. I want, and what's so funny is that him going back and tempting his dad or talking to his dad about joining forces with Robb Stark. He's like, no, fuck that, because that's paying a price. We don't do that. You know,
absolutely. I'm going to take my crown.
Right, exactly. It's so interesting and so unnecessary too. But it's like, Jesus Christ, dude, calm down. But what do you make of our thoughts? Or I'm sorry, our views of the Iron Islands and Pike and the castle and Theon and his siblings and his sister rather and his father?
Yeah, Theon's aggravating, but I enjoyed the hell out of this whole arc and watching it and rewatching it this time around. It's so good. The whole notion of what's dead may never die. I love that. And just, the whole philosophy, the whole ethos of paying the iron price, that you're basically, there's this whole nation, there's this whole part of the world that basically have this total pirate philosophy. You're not going to give anything to us. Everything we have, we take. So that's the iron price. We do it by the sword. We don't pay gold. So Balon's saying to Theon, like, what's that thing around your neck? That bauble? Like, did you pay the iron price or the gold price? And he said, I paid for it. And he rips it off of him.
I won't have I'm dressed like a whore.
It's so good, dude. It's so good to have this whole thing where you basically, their whole thing is invading, conquering, plundering. That's how they have everything they've come to have, is they've taken it. And it's a whole nation of these people, this whole part of the world that behaves under this sort of creed. It's so great. And, Theon is also, he's an idiot. He's very easily influenced. He thinks with his cock. He's a boy. I mean, he really is a boy. I love the contrast between his lack of maturity and Robb's maturity, for instance, these brothers that could be so different. But, a man who really does struggle to know where his loyalties lie. He's really in the throes of a genuine identity crisis. He's from this place with this very dynamic viewpoint, but he grew up in this whole other place with these whole other people who are very different, very opposites. Everything they kind of live, all the rules they live by in Winterfell in the north are very different than the Iron Islands. It's a very dynamic sort of difference. And you actually do feel a little bad for him, even though he is aggravating to watch, an annoying character. And maybe that's in the performance. I'm not sure. And he has a very dynamic arc. If you think,
oh my god, his arc is
8.
fucked.
One of the biggest.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
his whole thing is just absolutely fucked.
If you haven't seen it yet, there's no. I challenge you this.
Ramsay?
If you could guess, there's no way you're guessing. Yeah, the Ramsay Bolton thing. I mean, oh God, what's the nickname again? Oh, we won't even get there. We won't do that yet. We won't ruin it. But yeah, unbelievable. And now don't forget, we have this sort of power vacuum, this power struggle for the crown in Westeros. We have Robb, we have Joffrey, we have Stannis, we had Renly, we just lost him. Now we have Balon. He's another contender, right? But he's going to take it. Robb's not going to give it to him. He's going to take it. So, and others. But now you add sort of the Ironborn to this whole equation, dude. It just got so interesting. I really don't know why I glossed over it so much more in my first viewing, but this is one of the one of the groups of characters, one of the story points, one of the places in this world that I'm really savoring this time around. I really enjoy it. It's and again, I never really saw that tied into fantasy like this before. It's very clever and very interesting.
Yeah, they're basically Norse-like marauders in some way, And I like the insult that he is, while his sister is given, like, the full fleet to go ham, he's dispatched with one ship to go just raid towns on the shore. And he makes the executive decision, I guess, that he's just going to go and take Winterfell, knowing that Winterfell is left unguarded.
There's nobody there.
Very much like a risk piece, very much like a risk map, where you just send all your troops to the border, leaving everything behind you is totally unprotected. And so he goes and he takes it. And that's a frustrating thing to watch, even though I know it happens. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what did you think was going to happen here? I don't understand. These people all know who you are. You're not some foreigner to them. You're just a turncoat and a traitor to them. And he kills some innocent people. And I don't know. I love the horn part where the guy's just blaring the horn and he's just like, it's actually hysterical. Like, because it goes away for a few seconds and it's like, beep, beep, beep. And it's like sleep. 5 or 6 seconds of nothing. And then and you can imagine that just going on for days. It's hysterical. And it brings up, and I'll talk about it more later, about siege warfare in general. But what did you think about him going to Winterfell and kind of turning on them and creating a problem for them when they really didn't need it? And it's just frustrating. I understand, it's as you said, he's easily influenced because he knows that he's on the outside of both families, really. He's, along with Jon, kind of the least important member of the family on the Stark side. And then on the Greyjoy side, he was kind of lost and willed over into the war, and no one ever really tried to go get him or make a deal for him. They never expected maybe even to see him again. So I just wonder what you thought about him turning on them. And obviously it doesn't work out for him, but it's a shame nonetheless, because some cool people die, some good characters die, which is part of Game of Thrones. But also it's just kind of tough to watch because you look at Winterfell and the Starks as kind of the good guys, if there are good guys. And so you don't want to see them fucked around with.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most cowardly move ever. And it really makes you hate Theon even more, even though you're sympathetic, at the heart of hearts that this guy is having an identity crisis to a severe degree. But what the things he does makes it worse. Again, speaking to this, just the fact that he's an imbecile, going to take Winterfell, knowing that the ruler of Winterfell is his crippled half brother. That's who's lording over it. There's no one there. Robb's armies are away fighting the Lannisters. They're already engaged in full effect somewhere else. It's super. And, it's so crazy to see Theon. He's got Master Luwin, who's the Meister that he grew up with, as the angel on his shoulder. Then he's got that Ironborn guy. I don't know who he is. His lieutenant as the devil on his shoulder. And it's so easy to see how easily influenced he is. Like, you're wondering, like, he's sort of a marionette on the puppet strings. He's so dumb. He can't think for himself. He's really, again, he's sort of like incapacitated by his indecisiveness and the fact that he really has no stones. He's just completely lacks any kind of courage or conviction.
Well, he won't have any.
That's what's so aggravating about it.
He won't have any proof. Soon enough.
It's awful.
By the way, the character you're looking for is Dagmar Cleftjaw. That's the character.
Oh, nice.
His lieutenant. I'm looking here now for you.
I love that guy. That guy has a great look. Very sinister looking.
Yeah, Ralph Ineson is the actor's name. And,
what is he in? He's in other stuff.
It says Ralph Michael Ineson is an English actor and narrator known for his deep rumbling voice. His most notable roles include William in The Witch, Dagmar Cleftjaw in Game of Thrones, Amicus Caro in the last 3 Harry Potter films, Donald Bamford in the BBC drama. So
is he the dad in The Witch?
Oh yeah, that is him. That is him.
I think it's him.
That is him. I didn't even think that was what the Witch they were talking about.
That is him.
Yeah, that is him. That's totally him.
I tweeted at him once and he tweeted back.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's awesome in that.
Said something about his voice, how his voice is just like 1 in a million or something, type of thing. Made a joke.
Well, yeah, you should get back to him and say, like, nice job as Dagmar Cleftjaw. You brought him up earlier, and we brought up Piracy, so let's talk about him briefly, although we don't get much of him. I don't know if there's more of him in the books, but Salador San, at this point, we meet him briefly. Now, here's the thing that I brought up a little bit, I think, in the first season, and I want to bring up again. One of the things that I like about this world, which I think is cool, is it kind of reverses the cross-racial mixture of modernity that we kind of have come to expect, such that there are no black people really, or they're considered kind of exotic. If you see someone, like there's a couple of prostitutes you meet along the way that are kind of exotic prostitutes because they're from other places.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I like how they kind of play that up in this. Like it's kind of a newer, like or an older world rather, that hadn't really formed and globalized yet. And so it's like, yeah, this guy's from this place and this guy's from this place, and no one really thinks twice about it. It's just that's the way they look here and that's the way they look there. I kind of dig that aesthetic. I think it's interesting because that kind of grounds it in some sort of tangible fantasy. So we meet Salador, the pirate, and Salador's son, and he's one of two black characters actually we meet in this, like, you know, big characters that we meet in this season.
Yeah.
And he's looking for a navy, or you know, or he's I guess he's basically a smuggler and a pirate. And Davos is looking for a navy, obviously, for Stannis. So we meet him briefly. Now I don't know if we get more of him in the book or not. I imagine we do because they're the ones getting all fucked up I think in the battle at the Capitol, right? The pirates. So
yeah.
Maybe that's just the beginning and the end of that in the book too. I don't really know, and I don't really remember much more about it. But what did you think about him and this idea of piracy? Like you said, bringing in it reminds me a little bit of Star Wars with Millennium Falcon and with Han Solo and Chewie, where it's like, yeah, it's smugglers and people that run goods and run blockades and do all this kind of shadowy, weird, necessary black market and gray market shit. Salador is kind of an interesting character from that perspective, although again, we don't get to know him very well. So what do you think about that, since you brought it up earlier?
Yeah, it's so cool. Well, you know, first thing I love about this is Sir Davos, the Onion Knight, is a character I really love. And I love that this character, this particular pirate character, is a nod to Davos's old life, you know, before he became respectable, while he was rolling with pirates and smugglers and stuff. It's such a great scene. You really, by the end of this 5-minute exchange with Davos and his son and this pirate, you really want more of this character. You're like, oh my God, I need to see more of this guy. I love the fact that in the world they paint this picture that there could be these pretty powerful men that aren't necessarily aligned with a place, with a kingdom. They're just powerful pirates. Like he was saying, I could give you 30 ships. He might have more than that. I don't know. But for somebody to have 30 ships, some nations in this world don't have that. So to know you're doing that via piracy, you know, Davos was saying, you'll go out, you'll rob a spice ship, a ship trading produce, whatever type of thing. And the fact that he's going to pledge his ships, but again, a nod to, you know, being a pirate, being a scoundrel, is that he wants them to promise Cersei. He wants Cersei.
Right.
He wants to bed Cersei. That's what he wants. That's his end goal. So he's not even in it for the money. So it would be amazing.
They insinuate that they don't. I think they insinuate that he doesn't know what she even looks like too. Right. There's something.
He just knows he's blonde. She's blonde.
Right. Yeah.
Because he's the Lannister.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
There's something.
He's never seen her.
Right.
Right. There's no photography.
Right. Of
That's
course.
a great point.
Yeah.
You
It's
know
interesting.
what I mean?
Like, yeah. He's in it. Yeah. And that's, again, there's just a lot of wheeling and dealing. Like, yeah, it's okay. You'll be the Navy that helps us seize the capital, and you can just fucking rape, pillage, and sack it, I guess.
It's all yours. Fame and fortune.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, but we just don't get much more of that. We don't get much more of Mathis either. The Davos son character.
No, that was one that I feel like was skimmed over. Like whether I don't know why they decided to cut that out. It can't be a concern for too many characters, right? How that ended up on the cutting room floor. There's other things that we'll learn about. You know, the masked woman in Qarth that keeps sort of this person that's portending some sort of omens to Jorah. It's like it's never really, at least in season 2, it's never really spelled out what that meant. So was that a matter of just editing stuff out where it loses meaning because of that? Or I don't know. But yeah, the same thing with Davos' son. And you know, with the pirate too, I love seeing these type of characters. It's like, I don't go in for the old religion or the new religion. My religion is what's between a woman's legs, and especially what's between a queen's legs. That's his whole thing. And I love the way he's dressed and the finery and, like, you know, his sword. Everything looks beautiful and it's everything he's gotten has been robbed. You know, it's been stolen from somebody else.
Indeed.
So good.
Well, you brought up Qarth. We should obviously go over there and talk about that. It's a pretty important location in this season. It's over in Essos, and it's a desert city surrounded by a massive wall, prosperous, kind of an oasis city ruled by what seems to be an oligarchical group called the 13. We don't really get to learn much about them, but they seem to be kind of the rich businessmen. It seems to be kind of like a mercantile city in some way. And as we know, Khaleesi and her remaining followers that didn't go off when her husband died, Drago died, is they are, well, first of all, let's back up. They are dying in the desert. And I love the scene where she dispatches the 4 riders or 3 riders in 3 different directions to find what's going on. And one of them finally comes back and says, there's a city Qarth or whatever. And she asks about it. And I don't know, whatever he says. I can't do my impression of
the Garden of Bones or whatever.
Yeah,
Jorah knows a little bit about everything.
the Garden of Bones. So they go over there and we meet this interesting series of characters, and 2 of them are of most important: Zaro, Zoan, Daxos, and Piat Pri. I really like this as well. It suggests what you were saying, which is that there are just other centers of power. In fact, what I love about really getting to see Qarth and other parts of other lands outside of Westeros is that they don't give a flying fuck what's happening in Westeros. They couldn't care less. None of these people. They really couldn't. It's so interesting to me, and it shows the grandness of the world, the size of the world, the smallness of localities. And I think that's what you're saying. There's so many centers of power, I think, because it's pretty primitive. They have weird things like they can send ravens out, and the ravens somehow know how to get from to and fro and send messages and all this. But generally speaking, their problems are far separated from each other. These centers of power are far separated from each other. They probably couldn't even wage war against each other if they wanted to in any effective way. For instance, and I don't want to spoil anything, but obviously we're going to see Khaleesi go back to Westeros at some point, and the idea is to go back with an army and they have to cross this water. Now, I've been looking at the map of Westeros, and as one does, and look at the map of Essos, and if you kind of turn it on its side 90 degrees, you kind of look at it as the Mediterranean world, where in the narrow sea is kind of the Mediterranean Sea, and you can see that there's just a lot of different societies around that arc, just like there was in that Roman Empire and all of the surrounding areas, where there's just a bunch of different societies. And though they are somewhat interconnected through trade and all these things, they're really otherwise doing their own thing. I love that Qarth represents that breadth that this show needs and the story needs, because it's not cataclysmic. What's going on for them is not cataclysmic for others. The overarching problem with the White Walkers might become everyone's problem because they're all under the cycle of winter and summer. But I really dig that. And I like that they represent that with a new location. Now, a lot happens at this location, and we can talk about that as well. But I'm curious what you felt about how you felt about that, and especially about the scene when they all come out and greet them themselves. I really dig that a lot as well. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel.
Yeah, you know what? You make a great point that I never really thought of with Essos, because so far, if we didn't read the books and we just saw season 1 and this much of season 2, we would think Essos was a more primitive place. So it is cool to see that there are larger cities with wealth, with armies, with ships, with navies, even if those navies are for trading, that these places, these powerful places also exist in Essos, where there is a sort of there is no need to communicate with the outside world. They have everything they need in abundance. They don't really so there are places that are more quote unquote Western, even in Essos. And I love that Qarth sort of spells that out. It's a very interesting model too, the way it's governed with the 13. We only really get to know 3 of these 13. And it starts with this wealthy spice merchant who seems to be the mouthpiece for the group. I'm not sure we ever even get his name.
No, he's only known in the credits I looked as the Spice King.
The Spice King, right, which is so cool. First of all, I love this guy's acting.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Talk about classic Shakespearean
Nicholas Blaine
sort of scoundrel.
Yeah, he's great.
Right. So good. So wonderful. And I love the way that it continues the story too with Daenerys, with Dany, that she's still in the Red Wastes, trying to survive with her people, looking for ships and looking to build an army for the cause of returning to Westeros to reclaim the Iron Throne. That's her end. Her dragons are born. She has Jorah. She has her advisors. She has this ragtag group. She needs to build up her power so she could return and be another contender for the Iron Throne. And that's her whole goal. It's so interesting because if it was up to the Spice King, she would have been turned away at the door. They might have not made it. But because of Daxos, she's welcomed in, she's fooled, and kind of Daxos and Piat Pri and maybe some of the others working together to sort of deceive Daenerys. But it's great. It's so cool. And like we'll see later with places like Dorne, there are these other places, like Colin was saying a little earlier in the episode, that feel like different parts of the world as we know it on Earth, right? Like Dorne, we'll see later on with Oberyn and stuff, where it's sort of Spain meets China in a way, like Spain meets the East, and really inventive, and where the people look different. The people have, the people look like proxies of people in our world. They dress differently. They have different customs. They fight differently. So when we see Oberyn fight later on, it'll be like much more martial arts style, which is so cool to know. All these things exist in the world, so it's very much like the Earth, like our, current Earth that we know. So it's really neat. And I love the whole arc with this, and I love the fact that it leads you to think that maybe Dany's found something. Maybe Khaleesi's stumbled on something that's going to help. And it turns out that, the whole thing is, was not on the up and up.
The graveyard of bones.
Khaleesi.
That guy's voice is the best. I love that.
He's so good. Oh my God, he's so good.
It's the graveyard of bones. Not doing it very well.
We must be careful, Khaleesi.
Ian Glenn. Ian.
The best.
Well, let's stick over there and talk about some of these specific characters. We have Xaro Xhoan Daxos, who's the black guy. Now, I like this character particularly because, well, let me back up. There's an element that I think is over kind of, they go into it a little bit, but they kind of just glance over it, I think, because of the nature of the show. Maybe it's not very important, but everything that's happening with Khaleesi is happening as some of the members of that 13 are rebelling against the entire governmental structure. So like this city, the greatest city that ever is or was, or whatever they say.
That's right.
They are under like a really significant governmental issue based on the power of those dragons, and how some of them turn, like you said, on the rest of them in order to make that happen. And I find that very interesting too, because it's kind of just comes and goes, but they're leaving this place in somewhat of disrepair in my mind, which I find so interesting. So when Daenerys is bouncing out with the dragons and finally gets out of there, and there's some dead bodies behind her, it's like, well, they have a lot more to deal with than that. So I like that from that perspective. But I like that Daxos character because he's new money and he makes that known, nouveau riche kind of guy. But what's funny is that he has nothing in that vault. And I love that. I think that's like one of the coolest payoffs. And of course, how dark Black Mirror-ish it is for them to get shoved into the vault and just the door shut. They're just going to
what a nightmare.
I mean, and it's dark in there and there's a limited amount of air, and obviously they're going to die and suffocate.
There's absolutely no way out with that medallion, which he's
right,
wearing.
Exactly. And it's so, it's so good. It's really interesting. And of course, then the Piat Pri character, I really like this character because, again, a little bit of supernaturalism. And what's funny is that his magic is much stronger than even his cohorts know, because they're like, oh, don't be tricked by his illusions or whatever. But they're not illusions. So it's awesome when it's very video game-ish. In fact, I remarked that when we were watching it. I'm like, this is very video game-ish, and that he kind of very Dracula-like in Castlevania 2 makes copies of himself and turns and like stabs them all in the back and all of this. Pretty neat shit. So what do you think about these particular characters and the flavor they add to this story?
Yeah, it's really cool. Again, that world building, getting getting an evil warlock type that creates proxies of himself. And you do think, all right, maybe this is some sort of illusionist. They're in Qarth. They have all this wealth. They're just playing games. He's a magician, whatever. It's a serious thing. They have this temple. There's a temple at the center of that. Oh, it's so good, dude. It's wonderful, which is kind of like, I guess, some sort of a maze-like thing, right? So neat. And the Daxos character is interesting because you really do think you spent a lot of the season thinking he has Daenerys' best interest at heart, but he's not. He's misleading her. And to have that, I like having the nouveau riche character too, because you have the other wealthy characters that in the show, the Lannisters, history of hundreds and hundreds of years, centuries of wealth over many generations, that you have these new rich, and who knows, it seems like Qarth is a newer place. It seems a little more contemporary than everything else we've seen, a little fresher, so, and a little more stylish, right? A little younger, maybe. Indeed. Which is kind of cool. Younger people. So that was really cool. Again, just for that world building and just for that variety and places and types that we know. Moving forward, we'll always know Qarth was there, which is kind of neat, and makes you realize too, or makes you think about what other kind of places exist in Essos that we haven't yet seen, and we know there's other places, but we know a lot of them are unfriendly. So that's actually cool to know too. Where are we going to go next?
Let's go north of the wall. That's where we're going next.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of things that happen north of the wall that we need to talk about in reference to season 2. Let's start with a smaller thing first, which is the entire encounter with Crasten and his daughter wives. This is interesting because it's the first time we ever really see. Now we see it in a much grander way later, but it's the first time we see like a societal structure beyond the wall. They've been riding for a week or something like that. They come to this place. When we discover about Crasten is that he's a known entity to the Night's Watch, and he basically gives his boy children away, of which there are copious amounts of them because he is sleeping with all of his daughters. He gives all the boys away as kind of tribute to be left alone in this secluded area where it's just him and his daughters. And it's weird and it's creepy. And this is when we first hear about the idea of the king beyond the wall as well, which is this amazing idea. So there's another king claimant, and their whole story is interesting too. An ex-crow, which is even more interesting, a turncoat. And I love this. And we actually don't know even much at the end of the second season about what he is yet, but we'll talk more about that whole arc. But in the meantime, let's talk about Crasten. What do you think about this creepy character that almost adds, and I think Game of Thrones needs this and has this, so it's not a bad thing, but adds a level. It's like a horror element. It's a thriller kind of element. It's scary. You don't really know what's going to happen. It's not just gore and gratuity and politics and palace intrigue and all of that. It's something a little bit more. And I like that they add that every so often. And it usually comes north of the wall. So what do you think of Crasten?
Oh, dude, it's. I mean, my first thought was there is a Walder Frey in the north, and his name is Craster. You know, there's a pervert pederast in the north as well. Every pocket of the world seems to have one of these guys.
They kind of look the same.
It's cool because it's kind of neat to see that there's this reluctant helper up there in the northern wilderness, this village, if you will, that does help the wall, that does help the crows, but because he's getting something in exchange, they give him weapons, they give him iron, he's relatively unfriendly, and he's also, as we find out, as Colin said, he's kind of working with, oddly enough, this mystical, supernatural, demonic force, whatever. He's basically giving the White Walkers his baby boys because they're useless to him. He just wants more girls to procreate and to have sex with and stuff like that. So the boys are useless, so he's giving them away. When Jon finds out, he can't help himself. And what compounds that even more is that it turns out that Lord Commander Mormont knows about this deal. He knows that Craster is giving away his boys to the White Walkers. And it's still mysterious. We don't exactly know why. We don't exactly know what the White Walkers are doing them, although we could intimate. But he is giving them away. At first, I remember being confused and not remembering, like, is he giving them to the Wildlings? Like, what's going on? But it's not. He's got some sort of cooperation where he'll be left alone as long as he puts up those baby boys for the Walking Dead, basically. And things get intriguing from there because you're like, wait, what? Like, there's actually people cooperating so they could survive. And Mormont knows it. Oh, shit. Things are a little darker than we knew. And when Jon Snow finds out, it's Jon Snow. He can't just stand by idly. It's Jon Snow.
Jon Snow.
Snow.
Well, we brought her up in kind of Ygritte. What do you think about this whole arc? Now, it's fun to see her here because, as far as I understand, she left Downton Abbey to do this role. And she was obviously one of the first maids on Downton Abbey.
Oh shit.
And then this role came up, and this is a big role. So she's in 2 shows I really love. So is Marjorie, by the way, because she's in The Tudors, which is another show I love, where she plays
I heard
Queen.
she was in that. I gotta watch
awesome.
that.
She's awesome in that.
Is she? She's a great actress.
She's a little number. All right. Sorry. I have a little cry.
It's all right. To get it out of your system with
Thank
Marjorie Tyrell. She's cute.
Yeah, definitely.
She's a cutie.
So let's talk a little bit about this Ygritte character, this kind of arc, Jon kind of getting brought to the king in the north. One of my favorite scenes of the entire season, I think, is when they kind of come up this mountain crest and they turn they turn around this alcove, and down in the Valley is just this massive capital city, basically, of the Wildlings. Now it's nothing more than tents and maybe some permanent structures, as they say at some point. Do you see any trees around you, boy? But that's just one of my impressions of some random character. Probably doesn't say exactly that. But we see this city and we realize that the Wildlings are huge in number. And what's most interesting, and this is what I love, is that they're coming south. And they're the ones that they have no interest in anything but survival. This is what's interesting. So there's another claimant to the throne, as it were, but he's not even trying to get the Iron Throne. He just wants to get his guys over the wall and to Westeros, away from the threat that they're most imminently familiar with because they're closest to it. This mysterious glacial rising of these White Walkers, which we see, as Dagan said earlier, at the end of the episode in massive numbers, get a little better idea of maybe how they work and they operate. Although we see them earlier on too. Jon Snow fucking kills one of them.
Yeah.
Back at the wall.
Yeah.
And we see them, of course, at the very beginning of the season, the first season as well. But what do you make of this idea? I love this idea of this pincer almost happening because these guys are like, we're coming south. Like we have to come south. We're going to die here. There's nothing left for us here. We're in danger here. Now, we haven't gotten too much of that yet, but we know that that's all being driven by the so-called King of the North, or King North of the Wall, whatever, who's this ex-Crow, this ex-Night Guardian guy. So, Dave, talk to me a little bit about how you feel about this particular arc with Ygritte and getting really far north of the wall and kind of discovering their society, which is interesting. I always love that. It's like discovering an alien society, like their alien city or whatever. And again, we don't see too much of it now, but we'll see more of it later.
Yeah. I mean, I remember really being shocked at that the first time around. Like, wow, there's people that are actually, there's civilizations this far north that are not manning the wall. Like, holy shit, there's people that live up here. I didn't even realize that existed. And, you know, it's interesting to see Jon Snow's greater adventures over the course of the season. He meets this wildling girl, this Ygritte character, who he can't bring himself to kill, by the way. He's supposed to kill. He's on this mission with Half Hand and these other few guys looking to see what they could see up there, exploring, and they come across these wildlings, kill them, leave the woman alive because Jon can't bring himself to kill her. And then he's kind of isolated with her for a while, and they kind of slowly annoy each other, which crosses over into them kind of hitting it off. And it's interesting to see this wildling girl sort of tamed by Jon Snow. You know, there's something you could see early on that she sees something in him, that she's got this crush. She's a little smitten with Jon Snow. And they go on this adventure together and meet their people. And then we hear of this larger thing, which is with this king beyond the wall, this Mance Rayder character, this legendary Mance Rayder character everybody talks about, who, again, sort of betrayed his duty to the wall and sort of started his own thing. I guess took people with him, which was a kind of a collection of people from the wall and probably a mixture of that and wildlings, and sort of have this whole thing up there, and that they're moving away from the threat. So everybody's kind of meeting in the middle. And I remember getting right into this in the beginning of season 3, but we're not there yet. So we'll learn more, and we'll meet people like what's his name? Thormund, Giantsbane, and everything like that. Great characters.
Hell yeah.
But this is the beginning of that. And finally it turns out that this whole thing happens with Jon Snow and the wildlings, and the whole goal becomes to meet. They have this whole thing right now. It happens. It gets a little complex, but this this legendary Half Hand character, who I think also, am I mistaken, Kyle? He's also somebody that used to be part of the Night's Watch. If
I don't know about that. I don't know for sure.
If I'm not mistaken. But they go off together, and the whole goal becomes to get Jon Snow in front of this king north of the wall. Right. So they even have this little thing where they kind of looks like there's some infighting going on with the crows, but it's really not. It's so Jon survives because he's Lord. You know, we can't forget he's Lord Commander's next in line for leadership north of the wall, or at the wall for the Night's Watch. So it gets very complicated. And I remember watching this first time being like, oh my God, there's so much going on. There's just as much going on in the north as there is lower in Westeros, and just as many characters to contend with too.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of characters.
And, they're under, like you said, too, they're under more of a threat as well because they're closer to this threat. That's becoming a little more, this threat's becoming a little more palpable now.
Right. They're meeting in a place, I wrote it down, Frostfang. Great name.
So cool.
And that's kind of where they're gathering and creating a plan to move south. And again, we just don't know much about it yet, but imagine the frightening nature of, I don't want to say you're like picking up your whole life, but you kind of are. If that's where you're from, you're picking up your whole life and undertaking this devastatingly dangerous journey that will require you ultimately to scale this miles high ice wall to get over, just so you might have a chance of surviving this threat that you can't, that a lot of people south of the wall don't even understand or think is real in any way, shape, or form.
Is that crazy?
It's a lot. I love it, man.
So far away, they just think it's a storybook tale.
Right. It's good shit. It's good shit.
Good stuff.
All right. Let's see what else we have here. We have to talk about Jaqen. Illogan.eth, Ethereum, I think that means, says, Mr. and Mr. Moriarty, I truly didn't remember just how good Game of Thrones was. Rewatching along with you guys has been such a treat. Now that more characters have been introduced, who are some of your favorites? I have to say, I was so hyped to hear that Dagan say he loved Robb. Robb from the very beginning was my favorite character, and season 2 and the last couple of episodes of season 1 is the season that cements that love. His compassion for his men and his confidence he inspires in them is such a contrast against every other character in the show. And Jaqen Hagar, who I don't know exactly how to say his last name, has to be the single most interesting character in the show, especially once we get more of him in the Faceless Men later in the story. A man wishes you the best and thanks you for all the content you put out.
Well done.
Thank you so much. We can talk about Robb if you want, but I really want to talk here about Jaqen. This character is awesome. Tell a man a name, and I love that he's such like, you tell a man his own name. A girl stole from.
I love that whole bit where he adds her. Yeah, Jaqen has to commit suicide for a little while.
Right,
he's a little worried about that.
It's so good. He's a great character.
Name me.
I love it, and yeah, we do see much more of this later with Arya. But what did you make of this? This is also very video game-ish, in which Arya frees them from the prison carriage when there's a fire and they would have died, and so something happens later that like benefits her, and it's this guy that's basically willing to kill whoever. And I love it. I think it's so interesting. I love this idea of like this code and this principle, and this is how we operate. And God was supposed to be given 3 lives that he wasn't. We have to appease him, and he's dead serious about it, including killing himself if that's what he has to do, which is so interesting. So what do you make about this particular character?
Dude, so good. I mean, I keep wondering, how did Jaqen and his 2 cohorts run afoul of the law or get captured, because they're on their way to the wall. And it's interesting to think Arya is the one that rescues them. So now Jaqen has a debt, but it also makes me realize what is going on in Braavos. Braavos seems like, we hear about Braavos. We know Arya's dancing master, the swordsman,
right,
from Braavos, which Jaqen comments on a little bit. And now we know there's this sort of the Faceless Men of Braavos, which are these group of assassins with these mystical abilities. It's like, what is this place? I need more of this. And the Jaqen character is so great. I love the acting. I love the way he pulls off the part, because there is a real mystical sort of odd, otherworldly cadence to just the way he acts. He doesn't act like a normal human. He acts like something a little more than human, or a little inhuman, whatever it is. It's like, what part man and what part monster is this character? And I love the fact that he owes Arya a debt. It's like almost like the Lannisters, right? It's like Arya rescued him and the 2 other guys. So there's 3 lives that have to be given up to this. What does he say? The Red King, which is another religion, by the way.
Yeah, right? It's a many-faced god, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Where the Braavos. So now it's this whole other religion where it's this thing where it's like this whole debt has to be satisfied. So give me 3 names. And of course we know Arya has her laundry list of names.
Yeah, she keeps repeating it, which is cute. Yeah.
And it's so good. And he really helps them. He helps them escape from Harrenhal, Arya and Gendry and Hot Pie.
And it requires him to kill more than 3 people.
Yes, a lot more, actually. I mean, he leaves a trail of bodies, which leaves you wondering more. It's like, whoa, who is this person? And then sort of follows Arya out into the wilderness and says to her, like, if you ever need me, basically gives her a coin and gives her a mantra, this Valar Morghulis, and says, if you ever meet anyone from Braavos, give them this coin and tell them this, and they'll basically find me. And you're like, oh, this could be interesting. And it does get very interesting from here. But I love the character. And of course, the last time we see him, he turns again and he has a different face.
Right. And in fact, I think that's what's interesting is that I think he does that because he has to, because he killed so many people that he's like, I gotta.
He's on the lam.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got to like kind of change his identity again. But he does that for her out of honor, which I think is an interesting thing, and a lot of honor in this. And speaking of honor, we've gone long enough without talking about Brienne of Tarth.
Now here we go.
Brienne's an amazing character, exceptional. I can't help, of course, but think about her as Phasma and how poorly they used her in those movies. I mean, I don't know what you were thinking. Oh, cool, a female stormtrooper commander in a silver armor with a cape. Yeah, we'll just kill her with like after she has like 3 lines.
Don't worry about her. She's fine.
Don't. Oh, you like that character? No, don't like that character.
So strange.
You like the Mary Sue character more. You like her instead.
Talk about things falling through the cracks, right?
So, Brienne. She joins the Kingsguard for Renly. She fights the Knight of Flowers, which I think is funny, which is Marjorie's brother and Renly's lover. And she wants to join the Kingsguard, so he lets her. I find the character so interesting because it's a little much in some way, because she gives herself to Renly in this way, but then like she serves Lady Stark in this way as well. So she's kind of all over the place. I think she's just looking for purpose, and we learn a lot more about her later. But this is a really appealing character. This is a lot of people love this character, and I do too. Not only because she's not taken very seriously, and I love that scene when she actually runs into those Stark men on the road with Jaime, and she just fucking slays them, just absolutely fillets those dudes, no problem. And Jaime's looking at her like, Jaime's like, cut me off, cut, assuming she'll need help, and she just fillets these dudes. And I love how she walks with this weird gait, like she's not meant to wear armor. Like it looks weird on a girl. It does. It looks weird on a woman. Like it makes her masculine, but that's just who she is, and that's okay, especially in this world where it's a little more bent, like we said. So, what do you make of the story of Brienne of Tarth and her introduction into the arc?
I love this character so much, and she'll get better, and we'll get more of her, and her storyline is wonderful. But the first thing that occurs to me with her is she's really thrust into the story really quick. You're like, wait, what? Who? Like, she's really like, all of a sudden she's just there. And we meet her, of course, like Colin said, she's fighting Loras Tyrell in this sort of exhibition match, sort of game, entertainment for Renly, right? Yeah. Type of thing, Renly and Marjorie. And it's like, it's a really interesting sort of, I guess, introduction for a character, because it just happens very quickly. And of course, she beats Loras, which I think is a little odd. You always hear Loras is one of the best fighters in the land, but he never seems to. I mean, he does come in at the end of the season with Tywin, and he basically rescues the Lannisters from Doom, King's Landing from Doom. But we see him fight the Mountain earlier in the first season. But she bests Loras pretty easily, and without a weapon. By the way, she just kind of dive tackles him and takes him out, takes her dagger out, and he submits. But it's interesting because it seems like Renly's like, okay, you beat my Kingsguard. Like, what do you want? She wants to be, her thing is, please make me a member of your Kingsguard. And you're like, who is this character? When she takes her helm off, everybody's surprised, but Renly's not. And Renly says to her, your father, basically it wasn't hyperbole. Like, everything your father said was true. So apparently her father sent Brienne to Renly to serve him. Okay, we know that. And we know later on she says to Kat that she never knew her mom. So we get a little bit of origin, not much. But it's also interesting that we don't get to see her serve Renly long because he's assassinated. And she says in that instance that she only got to hold Renly once as he was dying in her arms. So she must have loved Renly or something. I don't know exactly. But she just kind of shows up. And I love the fact that, every time she meets Jaime, everybody she runs across is so shocked that this skillful knight, is a woman. It's almost becomes a weapon to her. She beats those 3 Stark bannermen very easily. And, we realize that in this world, it's not everywhere is like the Iron Islands where there's parity with men and women. it's a pretty sexist society where women are sort of relegated to one thing and men are relegated to the other thing. Men are the warriors primarily. It's just the wildlings, I think, and the Greyjoys that sort of so far where we see that women could be part of that, part of the equation as far as war and warriors and battle and all that kind of stuff. But she's a wonderful character. And then with the loss of Renly, it's sort of tragic for her. And then she kind of swears allegiance to not the Starks. She's very specific about this. She sort of swears her loyalty to Cat Stark and becomes sort of Cat's protector. And later on, we'll see how it ties in with Jaime and Arya and the Hound and a lot of other characters. But this is a great beginning for, I think, probably one of the best characters in the show.
Yeah,
I think definitely pound for pound.
Definitely. Let's talk about Jaime. The champ wrote in and said, season 2 is the season where I began to love Jaime as a character. His moments with Cat reminded me of how people act today. Jaime talks about loyalty to king, loyalty to father, but what if your king hates your father? Yada, yada, yada. Jaime brought up an interesting perspective to Cat, and she had no answer. She just ignored it and called him a terrible person or something. It mimics how people just ignore certain questions if it doesn't fit their political ideology these days. People ignore what is said by a person they disagree with or don't like, even if the person is making a compelling argument. Interesting insight, champ. Thank you for writing in. Jaime is in a situation. In fact, there's so much that we don't see in this season, but that happens. At the end of the season, we see obviously the saving of King's Landing, which they kind of cop out showing that, which is a bummer. They show some of that stuff with Stannis, and Stannis is fucking awesome in those scenes, just destroying dudes.
Oh, dude, what a warrior. Who knew?
But they kind of cop out with that. And one of the things they cop out with, too, is that Jaime actually escapes. And then they get him back again. So he's captured, he escapes, they capture him again. And I wish we got to see a little bit more of that, but he's in a bad way. And then finally, towards the end, when Jaime is basically dispatched with Brienne to basically begin the secret trade that they want to kind of get going for the girls, the Stark girls, we see the combination of Brienne and Jaime, which is one of the great combinations in the entire show, but we're only just getting it going right now. It becomes so much more than, and it's fucking awesome.
It gets so good.
So talk to me a little bit about Jaime in this season and how you feel about him.
You know what the craziest thing about Jaime, he spends a large part of the season in captivity by the Starks, and being a prisoner of the Starks, it's so crazy that just his presence there in the camp, in the cage alone, is threatening to cause a catastrophe in the Starks by dividing loyalties. I love that. I love the fact that his very presence threatens to rip apart Robb's army because, there's a lot of Robb's faction that wants this guy dead. But he is trade bait for Sansa and they think Arya. So it's very important that he be kept alive. And he's probably one of the most important people in all the land at this point to everybody, to the Lannisters who want him back and to the Starks who really need him alive to have some sort of bargaining chip. And he makes it very difficult because he's kind of still an asshole. But in this season, you do get, in some of what he says, you do understand the dynamic of his family and how it's very complicated. Yes, he's sleeping with his sister. It's crazy. But he's saying this whole thing of how, basically breaking it down, of how hateful his family is and how he's sort of a pawn in all of that. Yes, he's one of the greatest swordsmen in all the land. Yes, he's this legendary knight. But there's a lot more to it than that. And there's a lot more to it than just him being a bastard. And he's starting this whole thing with going off with Cat sort of sending him away with Brienne behind Robb's back, mind you, and basically setting him free, where they're saying, and you see that interaction with Brienne, that there's some humanity coming out. We're starting to understand Jaime a little bit better. And I think also witnessing Brienne was, and what she's capable of, and just sort of beyond her abilities too, just Brienne's creed, her credo, and how she operates her philosophy and how noble she is. I think it's eye-opening for him. And I think that a lot of that washes off on him over time. And we see the very beginnings of that in season 2, which we'll see more of. And then we'll see, how other characters have an effect on Jaime as well. And other tragic things that are yet to befall him, very important things. When, basically, his whole everything that he's notable for, his whole notoriety is basically stolen from him. And it's like, who is he now? That whole thing. He's one of the great characters. Colin warned me very early on when I was watching originally in 2020 that, this is one of my favorite characters. And I remember being this far in and being like, really, this guy? But it gets so good with Jaime and Brienne. One of the best tandems, I think, in over all 8 seasons, for sure, these two characters.
Certainly. He's tortured as hell. You don't see it at first, but you see it later on, and especially in rewatchings. And he gets into that, as you said, he is a pawn. He says, and it was brought up in the letter we got about him. His dad says, a cat says to him something about what about your king and your honor? And then he's bringing up what about this? And what about this? These complication things. Like, my dad told me to do this certain thing. He has this name, that Kingslayer, which is basically an insult.
Yes.
Where he killed the Mad King by stabbing him in the back in front of all these people. And of course, this is a scene, as we brought up in the last episode, that we never see, but is like a pivotal scene where everyone seems to have been there. Like, all the key characters seem to have actually been present for it. And this crazy thing happens and he's stuck with it. But it's just that he's playing the part, in that case, of doting son and loyal to his family. And he's asking about what about these conflicting sort of loyalties. And of course, an interesting kind of throwaway line that he says, which I don't know if I picked up the first couple times I watched, which is that Cersei is the only person he's ever slept with.
Yes.
Which is really interesting. And there's something, I don't know, there's something very strange about that. And I find his character very appealing. I find him and Brienne together incredibly appealing, but Jaime breaks the shackles of the expectations of his family and what people expect of him and becomes something else. And it's his whole arc that I think is awesome and really great.
It's wonderful. It's one of the best. It really is. And, just the way he changes, but the fact that, he's in love with his sister and how that part of him, will that part change? Will that part be altered? Or is that a mainstay in his whole thing?
Let's talk about Cersei since we brought her up. Colby Frida wrote in and said, in your prime, do either of you think you could hang with Cersei in a wine drinking contest on the night of the Battle of the Blackwater? Thank you for writing in, Colby. Appreciate you. Good stuff, man. I mean, that whole thing where she's in that room with all the women, children, and just torturing Sansa basically and just getting bombed. Really interesting stuff. She's interesting because she comes off to me as almost impossibly evil. Like, why would you be like this? Why would you be like this? It's very weird. It makes very little sense. Even when you get to know her better, she's just this sinister actor, this sinister character here. So what do you make of Cersei in this particular season as she wields her power and becomes because she's, what would she be called? I guess dowager? No, not dowager queen.
Queen Regent?
No,
Queen
she's like the former, like her husband's dead.
Right.
The king takes over. I don't know exactly. I forget what that's called, but she basically is acting as Queen Regent. And
yes,
there are very few checks on her power because Pycelle, as we find out, is basically with her. He returns, of course. And so what do you think of Cersei in season 2?
That's an interesting point, right? As a widowed queen, she would probably still be acting queen until the new king, which is her son, takes a queen, I guess. It gets complicated. But I mean, come on, it's Cersei. We know this before. We'll know this going forward. She's one of the great evil queens of all time.
Is it dowager queen?
Might be. That might be right. That might be correct.
Yeah.
The correct wording. That sounds very
Downton
Abbey.
Does
that sound? Very Downton Abbey, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Cersei. I mean, so through and through evil, that unrelenting evil. It seems like her whole end is for herself, for her family. And, we talked about this a little bit with season 1, but that's really what it's all about. And it was so great to see her sparring with Tyrion and their sort of infighting over the course of this season, to the fact of, getting down to that one argument. And Tyrion basically threatens her and says, one day when you think you're on top, it's going to turn to ash in your mouth, that whole thing. And it gets real. And Cersei sort of promises it back and thinks that she gets Shae, who's Tyrion's, the whore, but who becomes Tyrion's true love, basically, and gets the prostitute Ross instead, thinking that's Tyrion's That's Tyrion's lover. It's just insidious. Now she's got the wrong person. Tyrion's one step ahead, but she's right on it. She's hot on his heels. And it's so interesting to see a brother and sister sparring like this, right? The thing with Cersei this season too that really got me was under, while King's Landing was under siege by Stannis' army, and she really is torturing poor Sansa in there. But the fact of right before that, she's ready to poison her youngest son. And what I realized in that moment, because she thinks they're finished, so they're not going to take Tommen. She's going to kill him first, which was a really interesting choice. And then it made me realize, Kyle, something. Everything Tyrion was doing in this season seemed to be positioning Tommen to take the crown, because he says that Tommen and Marcella, who are the youngest Lannister children, are actually inherently good, which we see that they are. Joffrey's he's gone point that past the point of no return. Joffrey's through and through bad. He's evil down to his core, to his bones. And it seems like everything Tyrion's doing is to put Tommen in place for the crown, because he knows that he's beyond Cersei's evil. He's just a good person. And Cersei's about to kill Tommen, meaning, right, it would, I don't think Tommen is a child. I don't think Stannis' army would murder the child, right?
I don't know. I mean, who knows? We see that there's such a fear of living heirs that Cersei goes and kills Robert's infant bastard.
Yes, that's
so
the
who
other
knows?
thing
I mean, she knows what it's all
God.
about. So I think that's kind of what's driving her to.
And we think, you know what? That's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because we think that's Joffrey's edict, because Joffrey and Cersei have that exchange this season, and Joffrey basically says that he knows, meaning Cersei thinks in that moment that he knows that she and Jaime are sleeping together. What he was saying was that, I know my dad had a lot of bastards. And Cersei goes and has all the bastards killed, including the infants and the small children. And you think it's Joffrey, and it's not. It turns out that it's not Joffrey. It's Cersei who did that. So really how vile she is taken to the next level. She's irredeemable at this point, midway through season 2, when we find out she basically passed down this edict for Thoros to go. What is it? Thoros Slint? Is that his name? No, it's not Thoros. Thanos. Is it Thanos Slint?
No, I don't know.
Hit her knight.
I don't
think it's that. Let me see what I wrote down. But that was. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was, even like, if you thought that Cersei could have any redeeming qualities, when Cersei does this, it's like, oh my God, it's a bridge too far.
Yeah, Janos Slint.
Janos Slint.
Yeah, I found it here.
Yeah. So that's it's crazy how she operates in the season. I mean, I really think it gets to the thick of it. By the end of season 2, we see everything that Cersei's capable of.
Indeed.
Including, not only baby murder, but going to poison her own youngest child, who's good, who's inherently good. Somehow
interesting that they both.
Genes.
Yeah, Marcella's sent away, which is interesting.
She's sent away to Dorne. And she's married off, or promised to a young Dornish prince. And we don't know Dorne. We only know Dorne in talk yet. We don't know Dorne yet.
Right.
We know it's south.
Right.
We'll know when Oberyn comes to town.
We'll know
what
more.
Dorne's all about.
We'll know more soon. And we brought up Joffrey. Well, you brought up Joffrey. I mean, we haven't really talked about him. He's obviously vitally important to the story, but it is kind of one note. It's just like, all right, man, I get it. The scene with the prostitutes is pretty sadistic, I think, but it's a little much too. It's hard for me to see the way he treats Sansa. It's like, why would you treat anyone like this, but especially women? Why would you ever treat a woman like this? But
it's so hateful.
But also, Sansa is kind of annoying too, because it's just like, she says her piece and she's kind of being very passive aggressive and all of that, but it's like, you have a little more spirit, maybe. I understand you kind of are in survival mode, but your sister Arya is out there fucking going ham. Robb Stark's in the field. Different. He's never lost a battle. He's claimed to ride into battle on a wolf. All the rest, like, do something. But
it's frustrating.
It is. Do you have anything to say about them?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? With Sansa, it is. You do understand what she's I mean, she's got to contend with Joffrey. She's got to contend with Cersei, all the Lannisters. Yeah, she's in full Littlefinger, Varys, all these crazy spies and spiders, and who could she trust? And this networking and all these betrayals and everything. So yeah, she's in full on survival mode. It is frustrating to watch her because every Stark is surviving in a different way right now and kind of playing up their strengths. And she's really being a pretender. She's really kind of trapped in this situation, which kind of gets a little bit, she thinks she gets a little relief when Joffrey sort of abides by Loras's request for Joffrey to marry Loras' sister, to marry, what's her name? So it totally went blank there for a second. The cute one. The cute
Oh,
chick.
Marjorie
Tyrell. So when he abides by that request, you think, all right, breath of fresh air, sigh of relief. Sansa's off the hook, but she's not. As Littlefinger explains, Joffrey's not going to let her go. She's still going to be his little dime piece, his little puppet. And then, but it is frustrating to watch. But it was kind of cool for me to see that in that moment before Littlefinger grabs a hold of her, she is relieved. Because as an audience, we almost even buy into her spiel, right? Like, Joffrey's my king and my family are traitors. And we almost believe it, that she's brainwashed. Tyrion knows what she's doing. He's like, of course you are. Of course you're loyal to your king. He kind of knows what she's playing. She's in full on survival mode. She's got to endure this. But that's the thing with Joffrey. It is like this despicable thing. I love that Bronn and Tyrion have this plan of like, he's backed up. Like he just needs to like be with a couple of prostitutes for one night. Maybe that'll give, and he just basically all but kills the prostitutes. I mean, he's really an insidious. It shows you like Joffrey is just beyond the pale. There's no, and they realize that.
Yeah, it's crazy that no one takes the opportunity. It's crazy no one takes the opportunity to just kill this kid. No, seriously, it's unbelievable. It's like, who is? There's just so many opportunities. He's not going to protect himself. He's not a warrior. He's not like his dad or anyone. He's not going to protect himself. So
no, but we see the community in King's Landing starting to revolt. They are starting to get tired of it. They do identify it,
right?
And it is getting dangerous for everybody. I mean, Joffrey is basically bringing them all down because of his attitudes.
he has a singer or like a bard's tongue, like we said in the first season, cut out in front of everyone. It's like, you think people would be like, who the fuck is this guy? It's just crazy to me that no one's popped him, since so many people are after the crown in this very unsustainable situation that they all find themselves in, where there's just gonna be a lot of blood spilt for no reason.
He's a monster.
Dave, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about here? I mean, there are a few other things we can get into, but I'm wondering if there was anything specific. I think one of the things that I wanted to kind of end with was that I love, as you said, Marjorie kind of coming in and taking Sansa's place, because this introduces a whole series of new allies for Sansa, which is interesting. Sure. Including, I think it's her grandmother, right? That comes in. And
the Queen of Thorns.
Yeah.
Olenna.
And she's a vital character. And I like it's so interesting. Sansa's kind of saved at that moment. And so that's kind of dangling. And of course, we see the White Walkers at the end, and we see an army of them marching in these mystical storms, these ice storms that encapsulate them. So we see that. And of course, Tyrion at the end is injured and scarred catastrophically. That becomes an iconic scar on his face as we see it at the end. There's a lot. I mean, we didn't talk about the invasion 2 itself with the use of the wildfire and the destruction. And as I said earlier, it's just Stannis is awesome in those scenes, just because he's like, fuck it, we're going. And he's climbing the ladders, just destroying dudes, like no regard for himself at all. At least he's a man about it. He's at the center of the fighting, which I loved. So there's a few other things we could talk about, but I'm wondering if there's anything you wanted to end with in particular.
Yeah, Stannis had 200 ships, and I always wonder if that was with the other aid that they get from the pirates, and they're were contributing 10, 20, 30 ships. That was amazing. That whole siege on Blackwater Bay with the wildfire was cool, and kind of another little supernatural mystical element that they introduced in that was kind of restrained and kind of neat, and basically a deciding factor for that battle. I mean, it was really kind of a horrible, really took the odds away from Stannis, and he still kept coming. As you said, he still kept coming on. And the only reason that the Lannisters even won was because they got the Tyrells to back them at the last minute. And of course, you see Tywin sweep in at the end there. I mean, the only other thing that we could talk about, Kyle, that we didn't really touch on at all was with Robb, again, leading this campaign against the Lannisters, was meeting this character who will become his wife in this season, Talisa Mygear of Volantis, who's basically this young girl from a wealthy nation who basically leaves her cushy life to become a healer. And we learn a little bit about her stories and her origins with a little exposition, and how Robb falls for this girl, and how that love will be the undoing of the Starks, because he's, as we know, he's promised to another with the phrase, because they let him cross. They gave access to the bridge for Robb's armies to get closer to the Lannisters. And by a result of that, Robb swore his hand in marriage and is defying that now. So we're seeing the sort of playing pieces put in place for that catastrophe to happen.
Setting up what is one of the most iconic episodes of the entire run. Dude,
it's coming, my friend. It's coming. But the Talisa character is interesting. It makes me feel bad for Robb.
Yeah, because he's got he's all these ugly girls. He's got the option too. But it's interesting because he doesn't show any honor when Joffrey is the one who actually shows honor in front of everyone. He's like, well, I already made a promise.
True.
To Sansa. Then it's the Maester that comes and says, like, well, she's a traitor's bloodline. You don't know anything. And he's like, all right, fine. I'll love you for the rest of my life. So weird. But Robb is like the honorable character, but it shows no honor in that situation.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's the one sort of redeeming thing we see Joffrey do probably over the course of the whole first 2 seasons. And the Marjorie character coming in with the Tyrell, the only Tyrell we really know thus far is Loras, her brother, the Knight of Flowers. But with Marjorie coming in, it really, she has that sort of exchange with Littlefinger where he says, you want to be a queen. And she's like, no, I want to be the queen. And you really wonder the way she conducts herself. Is this character friend or foe? Is this character really in allegiance with the Lannisters, or is there something else at play here? And when we meet her grandmother, the Queen of Thorns, Olenna Tyrell, we'll find out more. And that's one of my favorite characters, and that's when it starts really getting good. And it really also made me realize at the end of the season, again, there's 6, 7, 8 major characters that we haven't even, there's probably more, but the ones that occur to me that we haven't even met yet. And then we, of course, we're sticking with this party of characters that we already met. So there's a lot. There's so much to look forward to. But yeah, and I think over the course at least of the next 2 seasons, season 3 and 4, I would say from my best recollection that it just keeps getting better and better, which is something really fun to look forward to.
There were a couple of things that I just wanted to kind of touch on as we close, just to kind of throw out there, was just the idea of siege warfare, which we brought up earlier, is so fascinating to me. Now, we see a lot of this here, and this is a real form of warfare. And still, I mean, siege warfare is still happening in certain ways, certain pieces of it, like what we do, the blockade of Cuba, for instance, the economic blockade and embargo. It's kind of a form of siege warfare. But sieging is a brutal form of war. And we see the Russians trying to do it in Ukraine, actually, unfortunately. So I wanted to throw out that I think that that's really fascinating. I don't want to read more about this particular thing because I don't want to spoil anything for myself, but I love the references to the first men. And I don't know if they ever get into who they are, but I want to know more about them. I don't remember that at all. There's Bran's dream and all that stuff with that happens in Winterfell and outside of Winterfell with the Three-Eyed Raven and all of that. That's interesting as well. More references to the Long Night and people starving. We had brought up the Guild of Alchemists already with the wildfire, which I thought was super cool as well. Those guys are kind of mad, which is interesting, right? Like they're kind of crazy. And
they seem unhinged.
Right. And Tyrion at some point is like, we can't have any more of this, like whatever they're building.
This is going to destroy everything.
Right. Which is so interesting. I already brought up all of the, and you brought up too, what is dead will never die. And the whole thing with the drowned god. I love that as well. And, so there's a lot of things that we're left with, and it just opens up from here even more. There's so much more to say, but I think we've done our best in this 2+ hours.
Absolutely. I mean, Kyle, one thing that we're left at the very end of season 2 that's a really interesting thing is, of course, Sam up in the northern wilderness runs across this army of dead moving south, a bunch of them. First time we see them en masse, and they see him and spare him. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, who is this enemy? They're monsters, obviously, but there's some sort of intelligence there also. And
Definitely.
They leave us on that note.
Yeah, they kind of introduce that there are like multiple leaders of them because they show like
Yes.
that. But I gotta say, and I remember thinking this the first time, but I think it's even more poignant as a bad part of the show.
Okay.
In hindsight, is that man, they look they look horrible. I don't know like what the design philosophy was behind those dudes, but they look like they look stupid. It's not even that they look bad; it just looks goofy. It just doesn't look scary. It doesn't look foreboding. It's just bad design, and I'm surprised that that's what they came up with. What I was like, this is what you fucking come up with? Is you could do it so much more when you think about. I think about the riders in Lord of the Rings and the design of like the kings with their huge crowns and like the cloaks and stuff. Like you could do some cool shit like that with them. What would be cool is if they were actually totally unaffected. They're so unaffected by the weather and everything that they're just totally normal, or they're like they could have done something else. I know that that's not the way it is in the book, but it's just it's so bereft of design at all. It's just such a shame because everything else is so cool and actually so high quality up to the nth degree, and then it's just that. And I'm like,
I agree with you on that.
So. I don't think so.
The design is weak, and then the movement doesn't help. It looks very the movement, the animation, the way they've pulled off the visual effects.
Like he raises his sword or whatever in the air, and it's like, come on, man, this is goofy.
It's stilted. It's not moving right. There's something that uncanny about it. And, then you're getting into that whole thing of, you want every touch to be as thoughtful as every other touch. When you have that one thing missing, it's just like, oh man, you guys almost had it. If it would that one aspect could have just been a little better,
Totally. It's something that I don't know that I really like the idea, but we bring it up often of like going back and kind of fixing things in old movies. Now
that would be one
things
reason
with special editions, as we know, and they don't always turn out well. But it's like there's just certain things where I'm like, oh man, that's such a shame.
Absolutely, no, you're absolutely right.
But
that would be one reason. That would be a good reason to go back in and revisit something if you could improve that aspect. Would it be worth it? I'm not sure. It's an interesting question.
Shout out to the undead horse, though. I love the undead horse. The whole idea
creepy.
Of like an undead rider riding an undead horse. Very cool. Very, very cool.
You see the jawline go cut all the way up.
Right.
Because there's that missing flesh on the side of the face. Really cool.
Yeah,
that was cool. Good point.
All right, my friend. Well, let's wrap up this episode of Knockback like we do each episode with a dad joke.
All right, my dude. Here we go. Yes. I got one from a listener, our friend Adam. I think this one came via Instagram DM, if I'm not mistaken. Slide him in, my friend.
Oh,
I have so many. Oh, I have so many dad jokes lined up. Good ones. I think really good ones. Good. Kyle, how does a hamburger introduce his girlfriend?
I have no idea.
Meet Patty.
Nice. That's good. That's a good one.
Could have been made up. That could have been a good one. A good one that was made up.
Definitely.
Not
well
bad,
done,
my friend.
Bravo.
Well done, Adam, on Instagram.
Dagan, thank you for your time. Appreciate you.
Oh, it was fun.
Good job.
Had a blast.
Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Knockback, all things Last Stand Media, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access, the ability to get your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas read on the show, etc. You can also vote on topic ideas for Knockback. We do that every month, so check that out as well. We have more fan-voted topics coming up, including Uncharted 2, Red Dead Redemption, and others. Those will take a little bit of time, but we'll be there with those in the coming months. So until then, other topics, etc., etc., etc. We'll see you next time. Goodbye. Knockback, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. Knockback's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Knockback, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.